Wow, I can't believe that it's already been 2 years since my abuse and polyamory video came out. That was such a big project. Huh. I just realized I haven't checked in on Franklin for a while. I wonder what he's been up to.
The insistence on ideological purity creates an atmosphere of fear and oppression because at the end of the day, nobody's pure enough. Because you see, a person who accepts this narrative does not and cannot accept that consent exists. May 31st. Many people contacted me some years ago, before the accusations about me were published, to tell me a woman named Leanne
His
Yau
false statements must cease immediately. If I do not have your unconditional assurance by 12 p.m. PST today...
I'm serious. These are the tactics of the far right. Fuck fascism. January 24th. My attorney communicates to her lawyer that I began using the phrase more than two in 2006.
Well, here we go again. Hey everyone! For those of you who are new here, my name is mainly Mandy. I make video essays about a variety of topics, but sometimes very specifically on non-monogamy. I don't usually wear bunny ears, but today we're in hell! 2 years ago, my abuse and polyamory video came out, and the response to it was just so overwhelming in the best way possible. Thanks to efforts to share it, the engagement on that video, and the fact that some pretty prominent polyam personalities, try saying that 5 times fast, also helped to promote it. It is now at 22,000 views and is my most watched video at time of recording this. To anybody watching who helped with that endeavor at all, I just want to say from the bottom of my little black void, thank you so much. I really appreciate that. I'm honestly really humbled by the reception to my little documentary. Bold of me to call a little out over 3 hours long. Now, originally I did plan to have a sort of update video in February of 2023 because there certainly has been tons of happenings since my video originally came out. But that didn't come to fruition for a few reasons. One of the biggest reasons, honestly, was mental health concerns. I'm not sure if this came across in the original video or not, but having to just like go through that man's provable lies for, days, weeks, even months straight, as well as having to go through all of the allegations over and over again, really took a lot out of me. I don't like to use this word very often because I think sort of overuse has kind of robbed it of its weight and importance. But the fact is that the process of making that video was triggering to me, even with everything I did to try and take care of myself. It definitely activated a few of my less than desirable mental health features, in particular hypomania, which made sleep very difficult at times. It also became clear to me at a certain point that in order to make as thorough and as detailed of a video that I clearly needed to make in order to cover this whole story, it was going to require a lot more effort and time than I really wanted to put into it. Like, even a year later, the idea of spending that much time on Franklin again, I just, nope, couldn't do it, refused. So after trying and failing to make this video happen, I decided to just shelve it for the time being. I figured I could either give up on it forever or else I would eventually circle back to it. Well, here we are, baby, 2024. We got a new camera, therapy is going well, and it is time to dive into all of the juicy updates since my original video came out. Oh, you might want to roll up your pant legs before we get started. We got a lot of shit to wade through. Caveats, so many caveats. So, quickie review for anybody out there who might need some reminding. Franklin Veaux, co-author of perhaps one of the most famous books of all of polyamory, was accused of abuse and other disturbing behaviors that directly contradicted his own narrative and his public persona by 11 other people, including his co-author, Eve Rickert. The alleged behaviors included being financially dependent on partners, taking credit for partners' ideas, pathologizing partners' normal emotions, and of course, misrepresenting those relationships publicly. Not everybody who gave testimony were actually survivors of abuse or would claim that they were. Some of them gave testimony that was more there to demonstrate the way that Franklin's narrative would change depending on who he's talking to, and to help corroborate stories from the other survivors. Franklin's response was largely just to triple down, continuing to scream to anybody who would listen that he was in fact the victim of some kind of mass conspiracy put together by, of course, the real abuser, Eve, of course, and even went on to make a website to account for Well, nothing. So what has Franklin, breaking my silence more times than Starbucks opens a new location, Veaux, been up to recently? I wish I could tell you that Franklin finally sought real accountability for his actions, but that would be demonstrably untrue. He still is writing a lot. There have been many new blogs since my original video came out, and I'd be lying if I told you that I read all of them in preparation for this video. With that said, I did read enough to notice a certain overarching theme.
Virtue signaling is all about keeping safe by rigidly enforcing and policing the boundaries between us and them through purity and moral conformity. It turns on itself, it eats its own. It seeks out those on our side who are insufficiently pure, insufficiently dedicated to our ideals. It frequently spends as much time savaging those on our side as attacking those on their side. Liberals get absolutely giddy over the idea that one of their own turns out to be an abuser or some kind, a secret racist, a secret homophobe, whatever. They absolutely delight in it, and so will go hunting for reasons to label people atop the current social hierarchy bad people. Why? Part of it is that a lot of liberals absolutely positively love being bullies, as long as they can make themselves believe their bullying is in defense of the marginalized and downtrodden. Liberals love the fire of righteous anger. We're addicted to how it feels. Grabbing the torches and pitchforks and setting off on some zealous crusade makes us feel like we're doing something, and that makes liberals incredibly easy to manipulate. We all have to virtue signal and signpost our righteous purity all the time. The insistence on ideological purity creates an atmosphere of fear and oppression because at the end of the day, nobody's pure enough. This fear and oppression leads to dog piles and mob rule because nobody wants that jealous rage directed at themselves.
Damn. Usually you don't hear someone bitch about liberals that much unless they're about to go on the Joe Rogan podcast. He still answers a ton of core questions every day, some of which are just obvious trolls or else Christians who are self-righteous and he's looking to clearly dunk on. Almost like he's trying to signal his own virtues. Oh, and there was also this really public legal battle in which Franklin Veaux tried to allege that Eve Rickard had stolen tens of thousands of dollars from him. Yeah, a lot's happened since February of 2022. Despite losing credibility with the vast majority of the non-monogamous community, Franklin has continued to grow in influence over on Quora, ballooning up to 250,000 followers in the last 2 years alone. That number includes a not insubstantial amount of monogamous people who, not being a part of the non-monogamous community, don't really know the full extent of the allegations and or else only hear it through Franklin's very filtered perspective, an example of which we will get to later in this video. He, with the help of his partners of course, has written erotic novels which sometimes make it to conventions, minus Franklin of course, and he has even started a sex education / kinky discussion podcast. So when I say that I think that you should care about what Franklin Veaux has been up to even if you aren't non-monogamous, I hope you can understand why. While Franklin's influence certainly is not what it once was, it is still there, and it is something I think we need to be concerned by. Now, a few caveats before we wade fully into this. Number 1. This video is very much a continuation of a discussion that was started by this thick boy, which I highly recommend watching first if you haven't seen it. It is a long video, but things over here will make a lot more sense if you've watched that first. Because basically, other than occasionally saying something to, jolt loose a memory or two, I won't be going into the same depth of the allegations or any of that as I did in that first video. So go watch that one first, take all the time you need, take care of yourself, and then I will see you back here in like a week or so. Please be aware that this video does come with some content warnings, mostly related to discussion of abusive relationships, and will also include some discussion of bullying, harassment, and gaslighting. There will be some dramatic readings of, let's just call them disturbing quotes. I will say that I don't think this video is as challenging as my first one in terms of the content, but it also isn't really chill either. Like it's still Franklin that we're talking about. So, just keep that in mind as we continue on. And number 3, while this is a pseudo sequel of sorts, please be aware that this is a bit of a different beast than my first video. I'm not going to be quite as stoic this time.
It's just a lot of cock for me to handle.
Stoic wasn't the right word. Basically, be aware that I'm going to allow myself to be a little less polished in this one. Maybe allow myself to be a bit more emotional. Not mean, exactly. Just not as gentle as I could be. That is what #BelieveWomen is about, you condescending Okay, fine. I'm gonna be mean. Definitely angrier than the last one. But personally, I don't think that expressing anger at a public figure who continues to make a fool of himself while avoiding all responsibility for the harmful actions and narratives he continues to profit off of is bad, actually. And it definitely isn't bullying, Franklin. Okay, calm down. I want to remind everybody watching this video that ultimately, this is just my opinion. I do intend to show you my math, as it were, and make sure my reasoning is as well explained as possible. I just wanted to make sure that that was expressed right at the beginning of the video, you know, just in case anyone's lawyer's watching. Any conclusions that I come to are ultimately the result of what happened when I looked at the evidence that was available to me. It is entirely possible that I don't know everything, but please be aware that as far as I am aware, everything I am saying is factual. Last but certainly not least, I would like to make sure to, of course, say hello to a very special guest that we have in today's audience. Hi, Franklin. How you doing, buddy? I'm certain you will not be able to resist watching this video, regardless of whether you publicly acknowledge it or not. I can't say that I really care either way. All I ask is that when you inevitably go to your support group to complain about this video, can you just do me a itsy bitsy little favor, buddy, and actually say what I said instead of making up shit I didn't say? Because as we're about to see, Franklin hasn't been exactly the most honest bunny in the last couple of years. And the best place to start, I think, is going to be with the grand prize itself, the reason that you're probably watching this video right now. Let's talk about the grand legal battle of 2022 and why it was ultimately just some bullshit. Part 1. The legal battle begins.
Welcome. If you're reading this, you're probably aware that my ex and former co-author has engaged in numerous legal maneuvers that threaten this site since I left my romantic relationship with her in 2018. If you're new to this saga, you can see an executive summary of what's been going on here. The threats to this site include an attempt to modify a legal settlement by adding a provision which would have the more than two domain turned over to her. An attempt to register a trademark on the phrase more than two, which I've been using since 2006, over 6 years before we met. A lawsuit she's filed against me. I cannot express how much I appreciate the enormous outpouring of support as I seek to defend the work I've done on this site over the past 16 years. Not just your contributions, but all your messages of support and encouragement have been humbling as I deal with this situation. Thank you so much.
In March of 2022, Franklin started a GoFundMe to raise legal fees for an upcoming case with Eve. He claimed that she was trying to steal his trademark and the More Than Two website as a whole. He really stressed to his supporters and anyone that listened that the More Than Two website was in danger of being taken over by somebody else and potentially deleted forever, a website that he'd been maintaining in its current form since 2006. His followers responded in great earnest and quickly raised over $25,000. A little short of the $28,000 goal, but still pretty decent. By the way, I do apologize if my screenshots look a little funny here. I took these on my phone a while ago, and when I went to the GoFundMe more recently, I saw that there just wasn't the goal listed on there anymore. So this is what we have to work with, sorry. Donations were disabled eventually, and in March of 2023, we got this little update in which Franklin claimed that they had reached a settlement, which he essentially treats as a win. But he didn't give any details, though, which is a tad curious. Of the many things that Franklin has been accused of, being tight-lipped is not one of them. I mean, he clearly still has the website. Even at time of recording, the website is filled with all of these changes that he clearly added to make it more obvious it was his website. For example, his About page is now this long, weird ramble about all of the updates that have happened to the website over the years, which really only makes sense if you know about the legal battle. If this is your first time on the website, this just kind of comes off as someone who was really obsessed with maintaining some kind of perfect record of how their web design skills have changed over the years.
Back in 2000, the Polypages on Zero Mag looked like this. By 2006, the amount of content on the site had grown significantly. It was the most popular section of the Zero Mag site. By 2009, my web design skills were getting a bit better.
But in reality, this was Franklin trying to make a case publicly, maintaining a record for all to see in case there was any question as to who the website belonged to. Speaking of keeping records, while the legal battle was ongoing, Franklin maintained a detailed timeline of the proceedings. He even included some of the legal documents and some other things that supposedly helped to back up his claims. The whole timeline at this point has been deleted and nothing substantial was saved on the Wayback Machine from what I could see. So if you wanted to check this out yourself, you unfortunately can't. Luckily, I was smart enough to get some screenshots of these before they was all erased. Good job, Past Mandy. Very proud of you. So 5. Oh, I forgot about my bunny ears. It's hard to sell 5 when you have bunny ears. According to Franklin, things really kicked off in January of 2022 when Eve filed for the trademark of More Than 2. He even included a couple handy screenshots of the applications. That same month, Franklin claimed that Eve and her lawyers tried to change the terms that had come out of a November 2021 mediation, which of course included the big prize itself.
January 19th, 2022. Eve's lawyer sends my attorney a revised settlement that includes new provisions for turning over the domain name morethan2.com to Miss Rickard. January 21st. My attorney communicates to her lawyer that I will not surrender the domain morethan2.com, and that doing so is not part of the mediated agreement from November. January 24th. My attorney communicates to her lawyer that I began using the phrase more than 2 in 2006, advising her that we will dispute any attempt to register the trademark, and asking her to withdraw the trademark application. February 1st, her lawyer advises my attorney that she will not withdraw the trademark registration. February 3rd, her lawyer informs my lawyer she believes Miss Rickard has a rightful claim to trademark More Than 2 because a pre-existing outline or manuscript would have no effect on common law trademark, which vest only through commercial use. That is not the case for your client, as Thorntree was the first to commercially exploit the book as part of the series.
Okay, so I'll be honest with you all, I don't really know that much about trademark or copyright, okay? Like, I didn't go to school for trademark, I'm not a lawyer, I went to a state university to study theater arts and creative writing, all right? Like, no genius here. I didn't even know there was a significant difference between trademark and copyright before I started working on this script. A simpler time. Doing a little checking in with my good friend Google, I did discover that while copyright and trademark are both about protecting one's intellectual properties, they each have different rules about regulations and such regarding each. In particular, the length of time that they last and what they are designed and specifically to protect are vastly different. Copyright is focused on creative properties, think books, movies, TV shows, and is generated at the creation of the work. Trademark, however, protects items that help define a company brand, such as a business logo or slogan, and require extensive registration through the government for the greatest legal protections. I 100% plagiarized that from this website right here. I swear I'm not a James Somerton. I just am a dummy who has no idea how else to explain this. There are a lot of particulars here that I am skipping over, mostly because in relation to this video, they aren't really things that we need to discuss. The important thing to know about trademark law for this video really is just that it helps to assure owners that, no one's going to come along and steal something that is their unique brand or the kind of goods or services that are typically associated with it. And also, it lasts forever, unlike with copyright, which eventually will return to the public domain. In theory. Assuming I understand this right, which, I probably don't, trademark helps to protect the commercial interests of the owner, i.e. having an actual product to sell. So the question then becomes, at what point did More Than 2 start to generate income? Was it before Eve was on the scene? Because if not, that does muddy the waters a bit. We have documentation that Franklin did register the domain for More Than 2 in 2006, like he says, but a domain isn't inherently a commercial product. Even the sample chapters that he may have been teasing on the website prior to Eve and him dating doesn't really prove anything because, I am assuming anyway, those weren't sold. Some people do sell things on their website, of course, and Franklin does say later on in his timeline that he sold some educational tools. Even her side, though, seems to be claiming that this wasn't the case until the two of them were dating and they had written the book together. And if he was selling things on his website like he claims, why didn't he just file for the trademark himself years ago? My personal opinion is, who cares? like I said before, I am not an expert, and I personally don't think I really have even the passing expertise to come up with a reasonable argument for either side. So who cares? Children, come up with your own conclusions. Besides, we got a lot to cover, and I really want to move on.
March 2nd. My attorney informs me that I will need to provide a litigation retainer fee to contest Miss Rickert's application for the trademark. March 14th. Her lawyer sends my attorney a demand that I remove quotes from the book More Than Two from the morethan2.com website. March 18th, Miss Rickert files a lawsuit against me in name redacted county court, asking that the November settlement be voided. My attorney informs me that I will need to provide a litigation retainer fee, too.
Wait a second, didn't you already say that? Typos aside, that's a pretty big development, right? Eve Rickert is trying to squirm her way out of the terms of a binding contract and also steal someone else's website. Doesn't look very good for her moral standing now, does it? Now, do you remember earlier when I said that Franklin did include some of the legal documents in his timeline? Well, curiously, he never actually posted the original complaint filed by Eve's lawyers in March, nor the amended one in May. I'm sure that wasn't intentional or anything. He probably just got super busy answering Quora posts or something. Fortunately, I was able to get the rest of the court documents that he didn't provide by simply taking the case number on the documents he did provide and then just filing a request with the court. I didn't do anything shady. Anybody can do this. This isn't weird or anything. I didn't have to stand in an alleyway waiting for a guy in a trench coat with a bunch of files under his jacket or anything. I mean, I kind of would like another opportunity to wear my Carmen Sandiego Halloween costume. So, I mean, it was a little disappointing, to be honest with you, but anyway, I got a hold of the original complaint filed by Eve's lawyer on March 17th, 2022. So let's have a look at what it says.
At the conclusion of the November 2021 mediation, the parties had arrived at a tentative agreement as to some terms that were disputed. However, it was understood that there would be no binding agreement between the parties until a final written agreement had been drafted and the parties had agreed to all such written terms and signed the written agreement. Thereafter, defendant, Franklin, provided plaintiff, Eve, with a draft settlement agreement that encompassed terms never discussed as well as terms not fully agreed to by the parties in the mediation, including, but not limited to, issues relating to a Class 16 trademark, for which plaintiff specifically stated that any agreement was subject to her obtaining counsel from an attorney qualified to provide advice on trademark, and subsequent approval of any proposal made during mediation on those additional subjects. Despite defendant being given an opportunity to withdraw such disputed terms, which were never fully agreed to, he has refused.
Wait a second, did Franklin Veaux not tell the truth? Gasp. Part 2. Veaux Pas. Okay, so right off the bat, you might have noticed that there are some discrepancies between how Franklin has chosen to depict things and how the court documents do. Franklin told his followers, the ones he got money from, that Eve started the lawsuit as a means of getting an agreement voided to steal the trademark that so rightfully belonged to him. The actual complaint, though, alleged that there was no signed agreement, which is pretty solidly backed up by the fact that through all of the court documents, there is not a single signed contract from the November 2021 mediation. The complaint was filed because Franklin, allegedly, was making it difficult to complete aspects of their last actual signed agreement, the one from the previous February. I cut out some of what the court document says just because honestly it's kind of dry and not very interesting and, just for timing's sake. But basically what it said in their last signed agreement, the one that we actually have proof exists, is that they will agree to put together a mutual copyright trust, each nominating someone that can best represent both of their interests. They could nominate whoever they wanted, of course, but they would also get to ask questions and dismiss nominees if they felt they weren't neutral enough or were too costly. Franklin had been dragging his feet on his side of the deal, allegedly, and was not providing information about some of the nominees. Eve, in frustration, turned to the court. That is what the complaint is about. She also alleged that Franklin was the one to pull some shady shit with the trademark, slipping in terms that they had not previously discussed during the mediation. Oh, and all those trademark applications that Franklin posted on his timeline, yeah, they were all for books. None of them were for the domain. Not a 1. Franklin's timeline is honestly kind of brilliant. Just a masterclass on how to manipulate your public, in my opinion.
March 27th. I was able to pay my lawyer the litigation retainer to contest the trademark applications and defend me in the lawsuit, thanks to the kindness and generosity of people who support my crowdfunding.
See, the thing that Franklin is doing here is that he's making it seem like the complaint and the trademark case are one and the same. They are inevitably linked in the way that he discusses things from here and on in the timeline. Anybody who reads this casually is going to think that the lawsuit is about the trademark, when in fact they are 2 separate legal issues. He could have written, "My lawyer is representing me in a trademark application process. Also, he will be representing me in a complaint that was filed against me by Eve." All he had to say. The difference is subtle, and I can kind of understand if some people think this is like arguing semantics ultimately. But as a good friend of mine once said,
different things are different.
Eve filed trademark applications for books, ebooks, and audiobooks through an application process, which does include a time in which people can raise objections. There is also separately a legal case in which Eve has filed a lawsuit against Franklin for violating aspects of their signed February 2021 agreement. These are 2 separate legal battles, and just knowing what I do about what's coming later in the story, it's very difficult for me to not feel like this was deliberate on Franklin's part. In the next update on the timeline, April 11th, Franklin claims that Eve's lawyer has sent him demands to remove quotes from the More Than Two book from his website. Demands to remove things from the website becomes a pretty consistent theme in this story, whether it's quotes or even the timeline itself.
March 21st, Eve's lawyer sends my attorney a demand that I close my crowdfunding and remove pages from the More Than Two website talking about litigation. April 11th, Eve's lawyer repeats her demands that I remove quotes from the book More Than Two from this website. April 21st, Eve's lawyer communicates a demand to remove the quotes from the book More Than Two from this website or risk legal action. Lawyer also demands that I remove remarks about mediation from this website or face legal action.
I really liked how whenever Eve's lawyers do anything, it's always presented as like demands. Something that I'm sure his lawyer never did. It's clear that Franklin likes sharing these little updates, things about people trying to move stuff from his website. Because, well, it does come off a little bit shady, right? Comes off a bit like, hey, look at this. Can you believe what they're saying? They're trying to silence me. Makes you think, doesn't it? In May, the complaint was amended to include a little revealing detail that Franklin, yet again, had failed to disclose.
On or about 2015, defendant posted a relationship bill of rights, hereinafter referred to as RBOR, that had been co-authored by plaintiff and defendant on his website. On May 21, 2018, the RBOR became the subject of an author collaboration agreement, in which was provided, all money or other consideration whatsoever derived from the sale or other disposition of the work shall be applied as follows: A. In payments of commissions, if any. B. In payment of any expenses or reimbursement for either party for expenses paid in connection with the work. C. To the parties in proportion to their ownership. The co-writers agreed that neither will incorporate material based on or derived from the work in any subsequent work without the written consent of the other co-author. While defendant initially posted with plaintiff and Thorntree Press's permission, defendant has not paid any proceeds for his incorporation of the work into his website. Further, to the extent defendant is earning revenue from said website which contains the RBOR, he must split such revenue with plaintiff in the amount of 50%. On March 11, 2022, Thorntree Press revoked permission for defendant to include the RBOR on his website. Thorntree Press maintains exclusive publication rights to the RBOR. Defendant failed or refused to remove said work from his website. On April 21, 2022, plaintiff revoked permission for defendant to use the RBOR on his website. Defendant has continued to use the RBOR on his website and has posted updates to his website acknowledging plaintiff's revocation of consent and stating his plans to continue to use the RBOR.
Her lawyer sends my attorney a demand that I remove quotes from the book More Than Two from the morethan2.com website.
Different things are different. Literally, I just said that.
So again, Discrepancies. The Relationship Bill of Rights is a concept that was born originally in More Than Two. That is true. However, it was then expanded upon and became kind of its own separate thing in 2018. She's part of the band, but like she has her own solo career too. You know what I'm saying? Like she's not selling out Madison Square Garden or anything, but still small, respectable venues, you know? Good for her. Due to a previous agreement that they had both signed, the Relationship Bill of Rights was treated as its own separate legal entity. The agreement said that if either one of them posted quotes from it, they would have to give half of all generated revenue to the other person. Franklin had posted it in its entirety on his website, as you can see right here, but then had failed to hold up his part of the bargain, or at least that's what the complaint alleged. Permission to keep the Relationship Bill of Rights was revoked in early April. You know, right around the time that Franklin was running around telling everybody his website was about to get stolen out of his rightful greasy little paws, and he started raising money off of that. Also, this agreement went both ways. Eve was also required to give Franklin half of any generated revenue if she had posted the quotes, which he also would have had to give her permission to use. And I can't help but wonder, do you think he would have let her have the quotes on her blog if she was also raising thousands of dollars to be used in a legal battle against him? Just wondering. So we can all see that a very interesting pattern is starting to emerge. Franklin tells his audience one thing, but then the court documents paint a different picture, one in which Franklin himself seemed to be violating the terms of a signed agreement, which was also, by the way, provided in the court documents.
Is it a crime to lie to someone for money without anything promised in return, such as basically lying why I needed the money and the person gave it willingly?
Acquiring money by misrepresentation or deception is considered fraud. Yes, that's a crime. If you lied about why you needed the money, you've committed an offense.
Franklin, you did. Nobody, don't. The more I compare the legal documents to the timeline, I can just feel my sanity slipping away. Like, there's just so many layers to how deceptive and shady he's being during the whole thing. There's like this whole thing in the timeline at one point where Franklin keeps making a big deal over the fact that Eve hasn't served him properly.
April 13th. My ex's attorney, Ted Rowe, attempts to serve papers for the lawsuit. His service fails to comply with the requirements of the state of Oregon. My lawyer informs him of the defect in service. April 14th, Ted Rowe threatens to cite your actions which cause unnecessary expense when we apply to the court for an award of legal fees because my attorney has asked him to comply with Oregon requirements for service. May 13th, I still have yet to be served.
It's pretty obvious that Franklin wants you to think that this is a big deal because he brings it up a total of 9 times in this timeline. 10 if you include the entry right after the last one. That update's so nice, they said it twice. I don't know, I did bisexual guns. Franklin even goes as far as to tell us what he wants us to think it means.
May 18th, I've had another conversation with my lawyer today. Strangely, Ms. Rickard still hasn't served me, raising the possibility that the lawsuit is more about trying to bully or harass than to settle legitimate grievances. Of course, he'd be feel entitled to being served at a certain point. I'm sorry.
Now, when I read these updates initially back in February of 2023, my first instinct, honestly, was just that this was just all overblown, right? Like, Franklin talks about how he wasn't served to the standard of Oregon's legal proceedings, but he was very careful not to say in which way, which had me immediately questioning just, like, how severe the issue actually was. Like, are we talking major ethical breach in which someone is deserving of losing the Esquire at the end of their name? Or did someone just, like, forget to dot an I? Not being super familiar with this myself, I reached out to Keen Legal Mind, snappy addresser, and of course friend of the channel, Legal Kimchi, specifically asking him if anything about this timeline seemed unusual. He said,
Attorneys are busy. This is the probable reason for the lack of service. It usually takes a week or 2 for service. It's really banal. I don't know how lack of service is an indication of bullying. The defendant doesn't need to do anything until served. Read by author.
There's a point in the timeline where Franklin tells everybody that Eve's lawyer is going on vacation, something he shared with a bunch of strangers on the internet. Totally normal behavior, my dude. Which could mean that part of the delay was just due to him, like, having to wrap up several things before being away for a time. While I can imagine it might be a tad uncomfortable sitting around, waiting for something that you know is coming eventually down the pipeline, To call this a sign of harassment? Well, let me put it to you this way. Franklin, I really hoped you warmed up first, because that seems like quite the stretch. So yeah, the first time I read through this, I just assumed that this was all just overblown and Franklin was making a big deal over something that was ultimately just like a tedious court thing, just to get more sympathy and support from his, followers, right? But that was before I read the court documents. And oh my God, I never could have predicted this. Babes, get yourself some popcorn, get cozy. We're gonna be here for a little bit and this is gonna take a while, but trust me, you don't wanna miss this.
May 23rd, 2022. Motion for Order of Service. On March 21st, 2022, Plaintiff's Counsel asked Defense Counsel, Leonard Duboff, if he would accept service on behalf of his client. On March 21st, 2022, at 2:06 p.m., Plaintiff's Counsel received a letter from Mr. Duboff.
Dear Mr. Rowe, I am authorized to receive service of process. Please have your process server deliver a copy of the summons and complaint to my office. Pursuant to Oregon Rules of Civil Procedure 69, nice, this letter constitutes notice that we represent Franklin Veaux with regard to the above-captioned matter and that we intend to file an appearance on his behalf.
In response to that letter, on the same date, Plaintiff's Counsel transmitted a copy of the complaint to Mr. Duboff at 2:58 p.m.
Mr. Duboff, thank you for your acceptance of service. Attached is a copy of the filed complaint. Please acknowledge that electronic service is sufficient. If you would like a hard copy mailed, please let me know. If I don't hear from you by 5 p.m. today regarding the sufficiency of the electronic copy, I will mail you a copy. Ted Rowe.
On April 11th, 2022, Plaintiff's Counsel discovered that the summons had not previously been sent to Mr. Duboff and sent it to him via email. On April 13th, 2022, at 2:37 p.m., Plaintiff's Counsel received an email from Mr. Duboff in which he stated,
Dear Mr. Rowe, I received the letter you sent regarding the summons and we have still not received proper service. Please review Rule 7 of the Oregon Rules of Civil Procedure. I am once again requesting that you arrange to have a process server provide my office with appropriate service.
Plaintiff's Counsel sent Mr. Duboff an email on April 13th, 2022, at 3:13 p.m., in which he stated,
Mr. Duboff, there is no valid reason to have you, the defendant's attorney, personally serve the summons and complaint other than to unnecessarily increase the cost of litigation, and your demand is contrary to the standards and norms of our industry. However, if you wish to be difficult and require that we serve you pursuant to ORCP 7, we will do just that. Please advise your client that we will cite your actions which cause unnecessary expense when we apply to the court for an award of attorney fees.
On the same day, Plaintiff's Counsel received an email from Mr. Duboff in which he stated,
I am once again requesting that you arrange to have a process server provide my office with appropriate service.
April 25th, during a lengthy phone conversation with my lawyer, he informs me that Miss Rickard's attorney still has not served us. Miss Rickard's lawyer continues to maintain that the excerpts from the book on this website is a violation of copyright.
On May 6, 2022, at 1:58 p.m., Mr. Duboff was served by personal service on his legal assistant. On May 11th, 2022, Plaintiff's Counsel provided Mr. Duboff with an acceptance of service to sign and return. While Mr. Duboff responded to that email on May 11th, 2022, he did not provide the signed acceptance of service.
May 11th. Miss Rickard's lawyer has returned from vacation and has asked my attorney to waive my right to service. I've declined to waive my rights. May 13th, I still have yet to be served. May 18th, I've had another conversation with my lawyer today. Strangely, Miss Rickard still hasn't served me, raising the possibility that the lawsuit is more about trying to bully or harass than to settle legitimate grievances.
On May 20th, 2022, Plaintiff's Counsel left a voicemail for Mr. Duboff, again requesting that he provided a signed acceptance of service. Plaintiff's Counsel received no response to this call. On May 24th, 2022, having not yet received the signed acceptance of service from Mr. Duboff, Plaintiff's Counsel again called Mr. Duboff and left him another message with the secretary advising him that this motion would be filed or his client would be served directly if he failed to provide the signed acceptance of service by 12 p.m. Plaintiff's Counsel further followed up on this call with an email to Mr. Duboff.
Mr. Duboff, I have now sent you several emails and left you several voicemails, including another just now, and you have failed or refused to sign the acceptance of service. Despite your request to serve you, which was accomplished on May 6th, consequently, as a result of your refusal to execute the acceptance of service, we will be serving your client directly, unless said acceptance of service is signed by you. and received by me no later than 12 p.m. PST today. Further, I wish to raise several other issues with you on a call, but as you appear unwilling to engage in a telephone call with me, I will First, your client appears committed to blogging about this case, and much of his blog entries include knowingly false information. For example, one of his recent posts emphatically states that Miss Rickert made a copyright claim against him. You and your client know that this is false. There is no copyright claim against your client. His false statements must cease immediately. If I do not have your unconditional assurance by 12 p.m. PST today that your client will remove all such false statements and cease his false statements and efforts to contaminate the jury pool with such false statements, we will file a motion for a gag order. Second, your client, in his post, has taken it upon himself to talk about me, including but not limited to when I was on vacation. This is not acceptable. Please instruct your client to immediately remove such posts and cease and desist any and all reference to myself in his blog. Again, if I do not have your unconditional assurance by 12 p.m. PST today that your client will remove such statements regarding myself and or this firm and cease making any such statement in the future, in his clear efforts to contaminate the jury pool, we will file a motion for a gag order. I have tried to extend you professional courtesy, but your refusal to communicate with me, refusal to accept service despite your request for service, and your refusal to control your client will no longer stand. If the above actions are not taken as specified, no further professional courtesy will be granted to you. Ted Rowe.
May 24th, Miss Rickert's attorney Ted Rowe has contacted my attorney with a very angry letter claiming Miss Rickert has not made a copyright claim and labeling my talking about him on this site unacceptable. In the interests of transparency, I will continue to update this page with relevant communication from Miss Rickert and her representatives. As of today, I still have not been served.
Okay, that was a lot to get through. Let's see if I can sum this up. So while Franklin was putting on this, whole public show about being potentially inconvenienced and, maybe hinting that Eve's lawyer is incompetent, the whole time they were trying to serve him, but his lawyer just didn't send over the relevant paperwork.
The whole time you would, the whole time.
This is f***ing wild. Oh, and then all of these updates that he was making about, being told to remove things from the timeline, making it sound like it was some weird nefarious shady shit, was really just because they were upset he was so obviously lying to everybody and wanted him to stop. Even this bit earlier,
Ted Rowe threatens to cite your action.
Was misrepresenting what was going on. Franklin makes it sound like this guy was getting all pissy for being told to do his job properly, but in reality, Ted was just pointing out that down the line, if they decided to, push to get their legal fees covered, they would cite this whole ridiculous process as being unnecessary extra fees if anybody complained about the price point.
Eve's lawyer says it's not about copyright.
Because it's not about copyright, Franklin. It's about trademark. Trademark and copyright are two separate things, and I know you know this because you talk about it on Quora all the goddamn time. Oh, and if you're talking about the Relationship Bill of Rights, that still isn't copyright. It's a contract dispute. Fair use or any arguments about it go completely out the window if you have specific clauses in your contract outlining usage. The most generous explanation I can come up with is that maybe Franklin's lawyer just didn't explain things very well to him, and Franklin just uncritically regurgitated everything he was told all over his audience. But even that doesn't really explain away all of this. He quoted parts of the letter in his timeline. He read it himself, and this is still how he's representing it. Also, I would like to point out that while all of this was going on, Eve did make a post on her blog on April 5th called Concerning More Than Two. In it, she shared the original complaint, the amended complaint from May, all of the trademark applications, and also made it very clear in no uncertain terms that she didn't want anything to do with Franklin's dumb website.
Neither the URL morethan2.com nor Franklin's original writings at that location are subjects of litigation, trademark applications, or UDRP/ICANN proceedings. I recognize and will continue to recognize Franklin's rights to the URL morethan2.com and the common law use of more than two as the title of his website. I have never attempted to take ownership of any of Franklin's own original content published at morethan2.com or any other location, and I never will.
And yet, none of that ever got shared in his timeline. So much for transparency, huh? Somehow, this isn't even the end of all of it. There are more twists and turns yet to come. But let's pause, catch our collective breath, and take this moment to discuss what I have privately been referring to as the Leontiades letdown. Part 3. The Leontiades letdown. For anybody who needs a quick reminder, Louisa Leontiades is the journalist that Eve Rickert reached out to initially get the stories for the survivors out to the public. She had a website called Polyamory's #MeToo, in which some people chose to share their stories of abuse, or else were those who had, experienced some holes in Franklin's narrative and could therefore corroborate some of the stories being shared. The website also included her analysis and screenshots as well. While the website has since been deleted, the survivors having since moved everything onto their own website that they maintain themselves, her initial interviews are a big reason that we have the stories that we do today. As you may remember from the end of the year video from 2022, I had noticed that Franklin had put out some requests to find screenshots of the messages that Louisa sent out to people. In my original video, I noted that Franklin's character assassination attempts of Louisa never included screenshots, or anything else for that matter, that could back up his claims of her having harassed people. This is of course a part of a larger pattern to his counter-accusations. He rarely, if ever, has evidence of his own. He just says things and then expects you to believe him without question, which is why I was pretty suspicious of these claims against Louisa. Franklin seems pretty inclined to mischaracterize and misrepresent the actions of others who do not stand in support with him, especially if those people are aligned with the enemy. I gave a pretty good example in the original video of how he misrepresented one of the survivors, Amber's, allegations against him. Amber was one of Franklin's previous partners who helped to corroborate the stories of abuse and other disturbing behaviors levied against him. She's arguably one of his most important exes. She's the subject of his memoir, The Game Changer, and until more recently was somebody he held in very high esteem.
Franklin makes the claim that Amber lied about him having gotten her into BDSM, something Amber never said. He goes on to talk about having found a box of her toys and gear.
Recently, I found some of her old boxes. One of them was filled with old DVDs belonging to her and some of her bondage gear. I sat down right there on the floor in the basement, clutching a spreader bar that had been part of her collection, and I cried. I shook and I cried, and all the time I remember thinking, this is real. I'm not delusional. She really is gaslighting me.
This was just a complete and utter lie that Franklin told, because I guess he assumed no one would look more deeply into this, even though the evidence proving him wrong was there the whole time. Like, it's fucking public. You can go check this if you want. Does Franklin just think his audience is stupid or something? Because I honestly think I would be very insulted if I had been one of his followers and then I bothered to look into this. We are going to circle back to that later, so... do I have to say it?
Say the line!
Fine, I'll say it. Put a pin in it. Even after my video came out, I continued to see Quora posts and other such things that just completely misrepresented the allegations against him in ways that honestly made me see red.
These days, can women retroactively revoke consent days or weeks after the deed was done, even though she said yes at the time?
In principle, yes, this does happen, but it's not usually framed as a revocation of consent, but rather a I wouldn't have consented in the first place if not for X. To use one real-life example I'm familiar with, a 24-year-old divorced woman was into BDSM since she was 17, is nevertheless too young to consent to BDSM activities. And therefore, all BDSM activities she engaged with are non-consensual. 24 is too young to give meaningful consent to kink activities, so that makes the activities I suggested, planned, and purchased equipment to engage in non-consensual 22 years later.
Anyway, I have suspected for a very long time that Louisa's messages were probably a lot more mild than Franklin was leading people to believe. Like, regardless of what you think, she was acting as a journalist, and in journalism, reaching out to multiple sources with a cold open that don't actually go anywhere is very common. And also, undercover investigation is a thing, Franklin, okay? Like, Breathe, buddy, you're gonna pop a vein. This isn't to say that I think Louisa is perfect and made no mistakes. Back when her blog was still up, she did have a couple of posts talking about some of the ways that she felt she failed and, owned up some mistakes she had made along the way. I didn't go into the full failures of the Survivor pod because honestly, it would have been kind of a whole long thing that would have been also extra, and the video is already long enough as it is, so I didn't really get into it. But Louisa was part of the pod, and she has owned that she up. In the appropriately named blog post, Ways I Up So Far, posted on May 23rd, 2019, Louisa says,
I excluded someone from conversations that should have included them. I feared upsetting that person. I infantilized that person. And eventually, as part of a group, gaslit their reality by assuming responsibility for treading around their emotions. I became an established part of the process, and as the group dynamics took control, I was swayed by an opinion which proved incorrect. That others also were is irrelevant. I alone bear responsibility for the fact I bought into it.
Oh, Franklin, you might want to take some notes, sweetie. This is what accountability actually looks like. She also shares in that same blog about having scared off another survivor who stepped forward. This person chose not to share their allegations publicly after being made to feel uncomfortable with how much familiarity Louisa already had with them. In her wrap-up post on April 22nd, 2020, Louisa shared why she felt that some aspects of her work weren't ultimately as successful as they could have been.
When I look at the work on the Polyamory Me Too site, I can see where it fell apart, where my own trauma started to impact the work. It's after the first set of testimonies. Franklin's power and influence grew as soon as he and his wife Celeste divorced. He was everywhere, not only on LiveJournal, but on his website, in newspaper articles and interviews. The sheer amount of material I had to wade through was vast. As a writer, I see story blocks everywhere. It's literally my craft to create a story arc out of seemingly unconnected experiences. I lived and breathed Franklin's work because I was researching him. Part of me drowned in it. And as I drowned, I forgot that it was not about him. It was about the women. As I tried to make sense of the stories, I built an overarching narrative. In doing so, I suppressed and erased their voices. I did this. I'm a good person, but I've done harm. Although the final versions were approved by all the women, and they stand behind them, some of them were hurt unnecessarily in the process.
So yes, Louisa is a flawed human being, and while I do think ultimately she was well-intentioned and did want to help the survivors as best as she could, she did make some mistakes along the way. But Franklin hasn't mentioned any of this in his critiques of Louisa. He has claimed that she's not a real journalist, even though she did interview him once. Still no word as to whether or not he considered her a journalist back then. Said she was Eve's client, perhaps a reference to the fact that she's been published through Thorntree Press, which was actually back when Franklin himself was also an owner. Oh, and also one time he actually made a cover for one of her books, so kind of seems like at one point she was your client too, Franklin. And also made the claim that she was harassing people, but then failed to provide any evidence of this other than to say that I guess one of the people she reached out to was kind of a rando who had only commented ever on one of his blogs or something. Joking and snide comments aside, for the most part, it's always made a lot of sense to me why Franklin hasn't bothered to share any of these screenshots. Smearing Louisa has been Franklin's main way of trying to undermine the stories from the survivors, especially after that whole thing where that claim Franklin made about there being some previous abuse victim from Eve having been silenced was just completely demolished with facts and logic by Kevin Patterson.
Ancient Negro proverb, keep my name out your mouth.
I think about that video once a week, I swear. Ruin the reputation of the woman who brought all those stories to light, and you might be able to also undermine the validity of the stories from the survivors without that much added effort. So to have him release some of the screenshots a few years later was honestly pretty surprising to me. I did not have that on my Franklin Veaux bingo card. This is one of those examples where I can't prove definitively that Franklin did this as a response to my original video, but it sure feels like it, doesn't it? We'll be discussing at least another one later in the video. So, what did it say? What truth bomb did Franklin Veaux lay onto the community? Come on, I'm ready. Let's hear it.
Hi there, I'm a journalist, but before that, I'm also a person. And I'd be interested in uncovering the truth even if I wasn't a journalist. To that end, through researching endless clicks on LiveJournal, I discovered that you used to redact it, and that you were also involved, however loosely, with Franklin Veaux. I'm on a quest to hunt down the roots and influences of so-called ethical polyamory. I wonder if whether you'd have any time to chat about the scene back then, and any other stories you'd care to mention. I've talked to many women already who have various contradictory reports about the narrative that is publicly known. You can add me on Signal, Telegraph, WhatsApp, number, or Skype, creatively named Louisa Leontiades. Thanks, Louisa. P.S. You can talk on or off the record, whatever is your preference.
A couple of things. One, does Franklin know what harassment actually is? Because I've seen way pusher emails about there being cookies in the office break room. Franklin think that just reaching out to somebody like without permission is in and of itself harassment? Like, yes, technically that could be under certain circumstances, you know, like if a guy I've never spoken to before reaches out to me the first time and there's a picture of his dick in it, then yeah, I'm going to call that harassment, obviously. Something I think Franklin himself would also agree with me on. But this, I mean, this is the same guy who tried to claim that not being served properly was a sign of harassment, so I don't know. I just really question Franklin's grasp of the English language at this point. 2, she asked a person a question that they had every opportunity to turn down. Presumably they did if they let Franklin know about it and then sent him the screenshots. And there is no indication or evidence that she messaged the same person multiple times. Because the screenshots are edited with revealing information removed, which yes, that was good. Thank you for doing that, Franklin. I'm not criticizing that. It's honestly unclear if both of these messages were sent to the same person or 2 different people. I can't help but notice they are sent on 2 different mediums. One is an email and the other one is a DM. So if they were sent to the same person, it's quite possible she did this because she didn't know which venue was the best way to reach out. Like, I personally know a lot of people who just like straight up don't respond to emails. So DMs tend to be the better way to reach out to them. I don't mean to like beat this point over the head or anything, but you need to understand something. I'm on YouTube. Some of my colleagues, my friends, have been on the receiving end of death threats and doxing campaigns. Just go over to Jessie Gender's account sometime and see the endless harassment and just crap that sweet, incredibly kind, compassionate human being puts up with on a regular basis. I know what harassment looks like, and I take it very seriously. Franklin has shared stories of having a stalker. He even made a recent post about it, which includes screenshots, interestingly enough. This has been going on for some time now, and based on the evidence presented, I have no reason to doubt its validity. And that 100% sucks. Like, full stop. I do not condone harassment. I have said that several times, both in my previous video and in this one now, and I will say it several more if I need to. Harassment is always uncalled for, full stop. In light of the abhorrent behavior that Franklin himself has been on the receiving end on, I would expect him to have a little bit more mindfulness and sensitivity about just throwing that word around. But I guess I should have lowered my expectations. By the way, if anyone's confused out there as to why I interrupted my flow to talk about this, perhaps you all can understand how I felt when Franklin interrupts his legal timeline to bring up Louisa.
May 31st. Many people contacted me some years ago before the accusations about me were published to tell me a woman named Louisa Leontiades had contacted them on social media or through email claiming to be a journalist and looking for information about me. Miss Leontiades is a client of Miss Rickards, though she didn't disclose that fact. If you were contacted at any point by Miss Leontiades seeking information about me, regardless of whether or not you responded, my lawyer would very much like to speak to you.
Why the hell is he bringing her up here? Louisa has nothing to do with the trademark application process nor the complaint. So this seems just completely unrelated, right? You'd think so. But this case was about to take a wild twist that even a Vauxian scholar such as myself could never see coming.
Part 4. Follow the money. Even if it
doesn't exist. Okay, so on June 8th, Franklin and his lawyer filed their response to the complaint, and for the most part, it's basically what you would expect. Franklin agreed that the November mediation hadn't resulted in a final signed contract, but he denied having tried to slip in terms not previously agreed on. And he even took it a step further and alleged that Eve was the one to have done so. He denied that the inability to agree on trustees was done so in bad faith, and went on to say that the only reason he hadn't sent over the requested information was because they were going to move over to mediation. It's basically the legal equivalent of, I know you are, but what am I? He also went on to deny basically everything that was added in the amended complaint, basically all the stuff about the relationship bill of rights, quotes being used without Eve's or Thorntree's permission. He tried to make the argument that it was in fact covered by fair use as outlined in the Copyright Act.
Plaintiff, through both her former and present counsel, has attempted in bad faith to withdraw from the mediated agreement of November 2021 by alleging that the more than two trademark license was never discussed and that plaintiff had a head injury at mediation that affected her capacity to enter into a contract. The alleged head injury was never disclosed until the plaintiff's current counsel first raised it in the letter dated March 14th, 2022.
God, the infamous head injury. So, really quick, because I honestly really don't want to dwell on this for too long. Basically, Franklin alleged that Eve was retroactively bringing up this head trauma injury, very much implying that it was fake, obviously, as a means of getting out of their November 2021 agreement. This is the first mention I saw of it in the court documents, but it does come up in the timeline a couple of times as well. Now, from my understanding, even her lawyers were never saying the head injury retroactively invalidated the agreement. What they appear to be saying, as best as I can tell anyway, is that Eve would never have signed or finalized any kind of agreement that came out of the November mediation because of the head injury, which seems to check out considering, as I've mentioned now a couple of times, there is no signed document from that mediation. Also, seeing how the head injury happened literally the day before the mediation, I have a really hard time believing that they weren't aware of it. She literally posted it on her Instagram stories. I obviously can't show you that, but I remember seeing them. They were gnarly. But then again, there's a lot about this case I have a very hard time believing. For example, the fact that on the same day that they filed their response to the complaint, Franklin and his lawyer filed a third-party complaint alleging that Thorntree Press had failed to pay Franklin all of the translation rights and royalty fees that he was owed.
July 26th, Miss Rickard's attorney for Thorntree Press, Tanya Manners, asks if we will take the dispute with Thorntree Press to mediation. From 2014 on, Miss Rickard failed to pay me significant royalties from the book we co-authored, more than 2, including royalties from foreign translation rights. August 3rd, my attorney advises to hire a forensic accountant to audit Thorntree Press's financials and determine how much Miss Rickard has failed to pay me since 2014. September 23rd, my lawyer has issued a subpoena for the Thorntree Press financials for the years in which I believe Miss Rickard cheated me out of tens of thousands of dollars.
How Franklin was aware and knew for a fact that Eve had screwed him out of thousands of dollars is never made clear, of course. This is Franklin Veaux we're talking about. We're not seeing bank statements. We're not seeing evidence. It was just stated, like a known value. In the complaint, they allege that Franklin is entitled to see all of Thorntree Press's financials starting from 2018, and that also they should declare him the rightful owner of the trademark. 2018, not 2014? That's weird. In Franklin's legal timeline, the third-party complaint doesn't make an appearance until a little bit later. In the meantime, he actually focuses on the discovery phase of the case, very quickly, as per usual, painting Eve and her side as playing foul.
June 17th. In anticipation of the discovery phase of the lawsuit, my lawyers filed requests for information with Miss Rickard and Thorntree Press, the publishing company we co-founded and she now owns. July 11th. Eve's personal attorney has objected to the requested documents in the discovery phase of the lawsuit and is also claiming that the requested documents are protected by confidentiality. My lawyer has filed a protective order which would protect the documents that are considered confidential under Oregon law. July 22nd. Tanya Manners responds to our discovery request regarding Thorntree Press financials and our intention to seek default judgment against Thorntree Press by asking us for an extension on the time to produce materials for discovery. My attorney advises I grant the extension.
Now, unfortunately, I don't have the original discovery letter. Apparently, that's one of the documents that I just, forgot to grab when I was giving all my screenshots back in 2023. I did try to find it in other ways, but unfortunately, none of those panned out. It's not recorded or saved anywhere on the Wayback Machine, so unfortunately, I'm not able to show you that. But there is a part at the end, in October, when things start wrapping down, where Franklin lists everything out, or, at least he claims this is what he asked for.
October 10th. The deadline for the materials my attorney and I requested for discovery is today. Specifically, the materials we requested as part of the discovery process when Miss Rickard filed her lawsuits include documentation of Miss Rickard's head trauma that she claims rendered our original settlement invalid.
It wasn't a settlement, it was a mediation. Mediations aren't legally binding. Sorry, didn't mean to interrupt, but carry on.
Documents of financial transactions made by Miss Rickard, including financial payments made to Louisa Leontiades and payments made to the self-identified Franklin Veaux survivors.
What? Wait a second. But he said, didn't he say that he didn't believe the survivors were paid off anymore? Yeah, he did on the Man Whore podcast. I remember very specifically. He said, and I quote,
there was you at one point also, separate from Louisa, you at one point suggested that the women sharing their stories were paid.
Yeah.
Do you still believe that that's true?
I don't believe that that's true.
Franklin, did you lie to Billy? Honestly, him trying to make this happen yet again is pretty ballsy. Every time Franklin's tried to make the whole, survivors were paid off conspiracy theory stick, nothing has held up. In my original video, I myself followed the breadcrumbs he left, and all I came up with was this $2,000 PayPal goal that didn't even reach its goal, by the way. Not some $10,000 payout like he promised. But instead of owning that, instead of just going, I must have heard wrong, I must have remembered wrong, my bad, I'm sorry. Oh, no, he fucking triples down and it's like, no, there is evidence of this. And if the evidence doesn't exist, then clearly it's been hidden. I don't think my audience needs to hear this, but just to cover our bases here, it is so easy to just make up unsubstantiated claims about people. I can sit here right now and just make up whatever I want, right? I could say Franklin Veaux isn't actually a real person. He's 3 otters in a meat suit. And not only is that not illegal for me to do, but also, how are you going to disprove it? And sure, you could counter with, but Mandy, there is no proof that he has 3 otters in a skin suit. And to that, I could respond back, yes, but have you ever seen an official, there are no otters inside this man document? No? Rest my case. I guess I'm not that surprised about this. When you're making up entire conspiracies about, an evil cabal of polyamorous people, silencing previous instances of, Eve's abuse or whatever, throwing in a little financial intrigue isn't really all that much of a stretch. I guess I just thought because he had left it dropped for so long, I assumed he would keep it dropped. My bad, 3 otters in a skin suit. I'll never make that mistake again. When Franklin talks about in his timeline about how, only someone with something to hide wouldn't immediately cough up these requested documents, he's omitting that what even her lawyers were actually arguing is that the requested documents were just completely unreasonable and far-reaching in their opinion. And his own list seems to provide proof of that. What, pray tell, do the potential financial dealings between Eve and the Franklin Veaux survivors have to do with a case about the trademark of More Than Two or its website? The answer is all. I'm not saying I know with 100% certainty that Eve never had financial dealings with the other survivors. I don't know that. I can't know that, obviously. I do think that it's probably not very likely, or if there is anything, it's probably not nearly as nefarious as Franklin wants us all to believe. God forbid Eve ever bought Amber a coffee or something. A while ago, I watched this documentary about flat earth believers. And there was this one section in the video in which they were talking to, actual experts, discussing why flat earth experimentation never pans out. And the problem is that flat earthers start with the conclusion, right? The conclusion being, of course, the earth is flat. And so because of that, because they assume that has to be the conclusion, all of their experiments, when they fail, which they design themselves, by the way, I would just like to point out, they always assume it has to be a problem with the experiment and not their obviously very wrong conclusion. And that is what Franklin reminds me of. A conspiracy theorist working backwards from an assumed conclusion and refusing to believe that the evidence backing up his claims doesn't exist out there somewhere. In Franklin's mind, Eve has done these things, so the evidence must be out there proving it right. And if it doesn't, it must just mean that it's been covered up or there's been some issue with collecting the data. Not that maybe the conclusion itself is erroneous. And that's assuming he even actually believes any of this. I have no idea whether Franklin Veaux actually believes that Eve screwed him out of thousands of dollars and paid off the survivors, or if he's just saying that. I don't know what's real anymore. On their side, even Thorntree Press made the argument that the whole third-party complaint was completely erroneous, and that Franklin could indeed go check the financials at Thorntree Press's office whenever he wanted, but had failed to do so prior to filing. They also point out that Franklin had 30 days to contest any royalty checks if he felt there was something wrong, something which he had never done prior to filing the complaint. And they also argued that the trademark application process was a separate thing that would have a phase for bringing up objections. So bringing it up here, the third-party complaint, didn't make any sense.
By joining Thorntree into a state action over the current pending federal trademark application, Veaux is attempting to circumvent the well-established federal trademark review process and litigate an issue pending review in a different forum. Thorntree filed trademark application on More Than Two on January 6, 2022. These applications are currently pending before the USPTO. Once assigned, the More Than Two applications will be reviewed by an examining attorney at the USPTO. If approved by the examining attorney, the More Than Two marks will enter into a formal opposition period, during which third parties, in this case Veaux, can formally oppose the registration through a proceeding at the TTAB. Because the applications were filed before the institution in this proceeding, the USPTO has jurisdiction over this issue, which includes a dispute resolution process at TTAB. Therefore, Veaux's claim for a declaratory judgment regarding the ownership of the More Than Two trademark should be dismissed.
Oh, and while they were doing that, they also made a point to share the email of them offering Franklin the chance to come look at the financials, as well as his lawyer's reply.
Dear Mr. Veaux, we understand that you wish to review the financial records relating to your books published with Thorntree Press. Per Section 13 of your publishing agreements, you have the right to audit these records no more than once per year at our regular place of business, during regular business hours, and at a mutually agreeable time. The records relating to your books will be available for your inspection on or after August 15, 2022 at Redacted between the hours of 9 o'clock a.m. and 5 o'clock p.m., Monday through Friday, by appointment only. Please contact Redacted to arrange a mutually agreeable time for your inspection. Sincerely, Tanya Manners.
Dear Ms. Manners, thank you for providing Mr. Veaux with the opportunity to examine Thorntree's books and records with respect to his books. Mr. Veaux is declining that offer. I am confident that same material will be provided when you comply with our first request for production.
This is kangaroo court, sir.
Despite this, Franklin's allegations of having been denied his right to prove he had been screwed out of thousands of dollars from Thorntree Press continue, throughout the timeline. He brings this up well into fall.
August 16th. I have spoken with an accountant who will be conducting an accounting of Thorntree Press's books. My lawyers informed me that in Oregon, the statute of limitations for embezzlement is 6 years, so the royalties I was never paid between 2014 and 2015 for More Than Two are beyond claiming in court. Tanya Manners, Miss Rickart's lawyer, is refusing to sign a tolling agreement that would stop the clock on the statute of limitations for the royalties I am owed from 2014 and 2015, including royalties from sales of foreign language publications. August 23rd. My attorney has once again requested a copy of Thorntree Press's financial information. This information will demonstrate that Miss Rickard has improperly failed to pay me royalties on the books I co-authored and published through Thorntree Press. September 23rd. My lawyer has issued a subpoena for the Thorntree Press financials for the years in which I believe Miss Rickard cheated me out of tens of thousands of dollars.
Here's the thing, though. So, the third-party complaint, this whole complaint where he complains about having not gotten paid properly with Thorntree Press, It was dismissed by Franklin himself on August 3rd. The 3rd of August. Yep. It was just dropped unceremoniously like a sack of potatoes or something. Just gone. Not a part of this case anymore. He just failed to tell his audience the whole time. Interesting. I told you we were in hell, sheeple. You should have listened to me while you had the chance. You could have gotten out of here and saved yourself, but no, now you're in it with me, and we're not even done yet. And speaking of more things that don't make sense, let's go ahead and take a pause of this legal purgatory that I've somehow found myself in, and let's talk about what happened with Polypages. You know, assuming something did.
Part 5. A funny thing might have happened with Polypages.
In the middle of Franklin's timeline, there's a pretty baffling detail included.
August 25th. The organizers of Poly Day, a polyamory convention in London, canceled their 2022 convention after the owner of Polypages, who had previously failed to attempt to claim the trademarks and take over organization of Poly Day, and who claims to be working in support of my ex, released a TikTok falsely claiming I am affiliated with and profit from Poly Day. As a result of this video, people scheduled to present at Poly Day received threats. You can see the Poly Day organizer's statement here. I have written a statement here. It saddens me greatly to see that there are people involved in the polyamory community who think that emailing threats to polyamorous speakers is okay.
So this incident that's being alluded to here is something that I honestly wasn't really aware of when it was going down. From my understanding, all of this seems to have stemmed from an usually annual polyamorous convention that happens in the UK called Poly Day. It was canceled in 2022 when organizers claimed that some of the speakers scheduled for the event received threats. Supposedly somebody, the owner of the Polypages website, decided that they either wanted to do an event that was basically very similar to the Poly Day, or like they wanted to take over maybe organizing it or be part of it somehow. But I guess like the email that she had to reach out with was like a bad email, and so they didn't hear from her and she didn't hear from them. So then like she did create her own Poly Day event, but then the people who were involved with the original one got upset, so she changed the name to Polyamory Day, which seemed to calm things down. And then like both events were going to be happening for a while, and then wait a second, whoa, hang on. What the am I talking about right now? See, this is what makes researching anything about Franklin Veaux so difficult. The man just endlessly regurgitates information at you, and if you want to find some smidge of the truth at the center, you find yourself diving through like old blogs about canceled events and petty TikToks until you can't even remember what the you were even looking for anymore. This whole thing is honestly just a hot mess, and being already in the center of one, I hope you can forgive me for not diving deeper into the weeds on this. The majority of the situation truly has nothing, and I really mean that, nothing to do with the legal battle. In my opinion, he's only bringing it up in this timeline to either pad it out a bit, or because he's trying to, paint people who have ever even stood next to Eve in solidarity as being part of some kind of evil cabal. Or, both. The only relevant bit here, and I'm talking like really stretching the definition of the word right now, is that the owner of the Polypages website is supportive of his ex. This may be a reference to the one or two events that Eve has done with Polypages, like she's been on as a guest speaker, I think, to talk about writing and or the publishing industry. It could also be a reference to the fact that one of the articles about the allegations, the one by Kali Tal, was actually moved onto the Polypages website after it kept getting reported and removed from Medium. So an article written by another person was put on a website owned by yet another person, and Franklin felt the need to bring this up on the timeline chronicling the legal battle he had with Eve because. But wait a second, why was Kali's article being removed from Medium? Now that seems like a question actually worthy of my time and effort. Apparently somebody, have no idea who that could be, made the argument that the article was harassment, specifically because it named Franklin by name. And whoever is in charge of making the decisions over on Media's end looked at that argument and went, yeah, okay, that totally checks out. And you know what? Like it or not, that is Medium's call, right? Like they have very strict policy about this, about not naming people by name and allegations against them, especially if they're a public figure. So like, I totally understand that is the rule for everybody, and they're very strict about that. No special treatment. I totally understand. Oh, completely unrelated. Did you know that Franklin has a Medium account?
I really hate that man.
So did something weird happen with the Polypages account? Maybe, but it literally has nothing to do with the legal case at all. Much like with the Louisa bit, this really only seems to be something he's bringing up to help Franklin's assertions that there's just like a bunch of people out there arbitrarily out to hurt him or anybody even remotely related to him. Those bunny ears are made of tinfoil, I swear. Surely this is the last time Franklin brings up something unrelated on his timeline, right? Right? Oh dear God, please, no, I don't think I can take it.
Part 6. The Rumor That Never Was.
October 1st. In February, even those in her orbit mounted a vicious social media campaign of really weird lies about a new book on polyamory, A World Beyond Monogamy, written by a British BBC and Reuters journalist named Jonathan Kent.
I just want to go home. I just want to go home. So for those of you who don't remember, A World Beyond Monogamy was a book by Jonathan Kent that was written using basically interviews with polyamorous people from all over the globe. The book was published through Luminestre Press, a publishing company that was started by Franklin, Eunice, and Kent. Franklin is no longer an owner of the company because he wanted to focus on writing, or, at least that's the official story. Whether or not that's true, I mean, who knows? But they do still, of course, publish the erotic books that he co-authors with Eunice, as well as this sci-fi one that they wrote together under a pseudonym. Or at least they did. They actually haven't published anything since March of 2023. Before my video came out, there actually was a little bit of controversy around A World Beyond Monogamy because, as it turned out, not everybody who was interviewed for the book was aware of Kent's connection to Luminestre Press and, therefore, Franklin Veaux. Upon finding out about the connection, Kevin Patterson, author of the book Love is Not Colorblind, specifically asked for his contributions to be removed. As a reminder, Kevin was actually somebody who prior to this had some beef with Franklin because Franklin had tried to make the claim that Kevin was essentially strong-armed into silencing a previous victim of Eve's abuse in order to get published, which Kevin adamantly denied.
If you're in negotiations to sign your first publishing contract and the person who will make the final decision about your future tells you to remove an abuse report about her, you do it. No, the fuck you don't. I don't know how your ethics work, but I know mine doesn't remove some abuse report because of some contract. What the fuck?
So it wasn't really surprising to hear that he wasn't thrilled about that connection. I did find this all a bit shady too when it was going down and did add them a bit about this. I also retweeted Kevin when that information came to light. So you can imagine that when I read this, I was very interested to see exactly how Franklin was going to cover this whole event. And it was buck f***ing wild.
Gather round, everyone, and let me tell you a story. It's a story full of pornography, intrigue, rumor, innuendo, misplaced credit for a massive book, and kinky sex.
Oh, Jesus Christ. Okay, I'm gonna just go ahead and disappoint everybody right now. The story literally has nothing to do with kinky sex or anything of that ilk. Like, he's just talking about his books. He's just trying to promote his books. Franklin, why are you like this? We're gonna skip ahead a little bit, but basically all you need to know about this first section is that Franklin essentially explains that he and Eunice were having a very difficult time getting anybody interested in publishing their erotic books. So Eunice had the idea that, they should start a publishing company and bring in her friend Kent because he's like a smart boy and a real journalist. We know he's a real journalist because Franklin makes a point to say it. And, they did it. They started the company. Yay, the power of friendship or something, I don't know. And then Kent went on to work on his book.
Kent's book sprang from a simple proposition. Approach consensual non-monogamy just as you would have if you were reporting for one of the news organizations you'd worked for, interviewing people from a wide range of backgrounds and presenting the conclusions. His book sported interviews with 60 or so people from all over the world, one of the first rigorously researched polyamory books to take a truly global perspective ever to be written.
Sported? Who said sported? Also, are we getting to the point anytime soon? Because I think while I wait, I'm just going to go ahead and take a big old drink of this delicious beverage. I'm sure I won't regret this at all.
From the moment the crowdfunder for the book was announced, there were some unbelievably strange allegations from some quarters of the poly scene, and some frankly ridiculous ones. First, and the one that amused me most, is that I wrote it.
Excuse me?
Now, I have to admit I'm flattered. I like my writing. But I'm not sure that I could write quite like an experienced English journalist, with references to Monty Python and a bunch of British stuff I've never heard of and all, together with a sense of humor that's very noticeably British. And there's also the fact that many of his interviews were conducted in person, so if I secretly wrote the book, I also have even better disguise skills than that one dude from Mission Impossible, which is kind of cool, I guess.
Our Father who art in heaven, I don't usually pray to you because I believe in science, but if you could just make this man shut the fuck up, that would be amazing.
Then there are the people who've taken issues with the fact that he's a white guy, and the book includes a whole range of voices from around the world, many of whom are people of color and are queer, quoting them extensively and discussing ethical non-monogamy from their perspectives. This is exactly what Jonathan did as a correspondent. It's called journalism. The point with good journalism is that it collects a range of views and represents them fairly. And if someone wrote a book including voices from different parts of the world, but they were all straight and male, wouldn't that be weirder? Anyhow, perhaps the weirdest thing is that people are saying that people shouldn't buy this book because I profit from it. I don't.
Yeah, hi, I'm so curious. How much does it cost if I wanted to rent one of those rage rooms, where I come in and I break a bunch of shit? Yeah. Okay, cool. And do you accept credit card by any chance?
And just for the record, I stepped down from Luminostra more than a year ago when this bizarre Jonathan is Franklin's cat's paw. Franklin secretly wrote this book. Weirdness started. These days I recommend a world beyond monogamy, even though I make no money from it. And nevertheless, people are still getting attacked and threatened over all this. Not just Jonathan, someone I should add that I've met in person precisely once, but people he knows, apparently just because he knows them, and maybe people they know too. It's happening to other people I know as well. Yes, you read that right. People not connected to me are receiving harassing and threatening emails because they know Jonathan, who knows me. I'm serious. These are the tactics of the far right. F*** fascism.
Oh, f*** you.
But what I really don't get is why some people can't see that behavior for what it is. Abuse. It's a standard tactic of abusers to try to separate their victims from other people, to isolate them. It's manipulative. It's controlling. It's about revenge. It's certainly not about justice. Follow the money. It's amazing how often it turns out to be all about the money.
What the Part 6, Subpart 1, what is he talking about?
I honestly feel like I just had the situation summed up by somebody who's heard about it third hand after tripping on cough medicine. I don't even know where to fucking start with any of this, so I guess I'll just start with the obvious question. Who said this, Franklin? Are they in the room with us? As somebody who was literally involved with this situation when it was going down on Twitter, I have to let you all know that other than the very last point, the one he curiously spends the least amount of time discussing, I have no idea what this ridiculous excuse for a human being is talking about. Like, literally none. I personally never saw a single person even hint that Franklin secretly wrote the book. I certainly never said that, not in my video nor anywhere else. Now, am I confident that I've seen every tweet or social media post or blog about Kent's book? No, of course not. I suppose it is certainly possible that somebody said this somewhere. But he also made a point to say when this happened and very much imply that it was like this huge deal. I find it very difficult to believe under those circumstances then I wouldn't have heard even a whisper about it until now. In typical Franklin fashion, no screenshots are given, no more information about where these mysterious hordes of conspiracy theorists are, or even how this conspiracy theory works in the first place. Like, I know I've been spoiled by creators like Mooncat and Kyle Carrigan, but can you just please show some actual f***ing examples of what you're talking about? Buy a conspiracy board, get some post-it notes and some string, put some effort into it, man. Kevin Patterson also did not say anything remotely like this. And actually, on the subject of Kevin, where are his concerns addressed, Franklin? You know, the ones that I can actually provide screenshots of and prove really existed? Like, who makes a whole ass blog addressing specific criticisms of this book and then doesn't address the biggest one, brought up by a highly respected member of the polyamorous community. What is it about situations with Kevin Patterson, Franklin, that just always make you look so much worse? Forgive me for putting on my own little tinfoil hat right now, but isn't it interesting how Franklin doesn't spend any time at all addressing the actual criticisms that I can provide proof of and screenshots of, but then spends a whole bunch of time discussing criticisms that I personally never saw in the year of my closely following him? Is it possible that Franklin would rather distract people with easily disproven rumors, things that at best were very fringe at the time, rather than address the more valid criticism coming from a highly respected source who has noted inconsistencies and outright lies that he's told in the past? Well, I can't prove that, but I also can't not prove it, which, I mean, according to Franklin's own logic, basically the same thing. God, I have such a headache right now. Also, I love that Franklin just couldn't resist making a little jab in there about proper journalism. Because, I mean, as we all know, the BBC and its staff has always held itself up to the highest standards of journalistic integrity. Just ask any trans person. Oh, wait. Also, Franklin, you're both right and wrong here about proper journalism. Okay, like, yes, ideally in journalism, you should be presenting both sides fairly in your stories, but not both sides are going to have the same weight to them necessarily. Neutrality is also a political position, and sometimes both sides will not have the same amount of evidence backing up their claims, thus negating the need to, treat them exactly the same and give them the same treatment within a piece of media. Like, the Earth is flat side should be presented fairly in the sense that it really shouldn't be given that much time at all, because it is objectively the wrong side. Like, there is no evidence backing it up at all. So you really don't need to give it that much time or energy when you're covering it in a news story. Presenting something fairly does not mean presenting it exactly the same. Do you get it, sweetie, or do I need to slow down a little bit more? And look, let's just be clear here for a second. I don't give a fuck about Kent or his stupid book. Like, I really don't give a fuck about it either way. Like, obviously, I don't think anyone should be harassed, so don't harass him, don't harass Franklin, don't harass any of these people, something I've made clear now several times. But seeing how just completely he has misrepresented the situation, I personally don't feel like Franklin is the kind of person I can trust to tell me the truth of whether or not Kent was actually harassed or not. And again, I have to ask, why isn't he taking the time to address the main criticism? The one we can actually back up as having existed, which is that people were upset and uncomfortable with the connection between Luminaster Press and Franklin not being disclosed before they got interviewed for this book. Especially when some of them were people they had to know was going to have an issue with that. For a man who has thrown quite the tantrum over Louisa supposedly not disclosing her motivations or her connections properly before interviewing people, he sure seems mighty comfortable when his journalistic buddy does it. But I'm sure Franklin would say that that's totally different.
Hang on, that's not different. Mandy, what's happening?
Anyway, to sum up this part of the video, Jonathan Kent has literally nothing to do with this legal case. Franklin is just bringing it up to distract people yet again, and also Franklin Veaux is a stupid head, in my opinion. While we're talking about disclosure, I do think it is my duty to come clean to you all about something which I actually have been meaning to bring up and address for a little while.
Part 7. Coming clean.
So in the original video, I made kind of a big deal about saying that everything about the video was entirely mine and that I hadn't been hired to make it. From start to finish, everything that I did from, just choosing to make the video itself all the way to editing decisions I made were entirely my doing. Nobody at any point hired me to make that video. I did have a Patreon at the time, I still do, but that's not really the same as somebody hiring to make a video. Patreon, for those of you who don't know, is basically an online membership service where people can choose to give me money for the things that I do. It's basically the equivalent of somebody having an open guitar case in front of them when they're playing on the subway station platform or something. This was 100% my own creative endeavor. And if it feels like I'm making a way bigger deal about that than I should have to, both in this video and the last one, Then welcome to Franklin Veaux's world, sweet summer child. As Franklin has more than once made assertions about there being money going on behind the scenes, I figured it was important for me to try and get ahead of that allegation as quickly as I could, and thus I made a really big deal about it in the original video. Plus, I thought it would be pretty funny. So, let me say it clearly once again. At no point did Eve Rickard hire me to make that original video. And while I was working on it, she never said to me anything about giving me money for the work that I was doing. And that's very important to remember because Eve Rickard has since given me money. Okay, calm down everybody, let me explain. After my video came out, Eve decided to become one of my supporters on Patreon. Remember the guitar case? If anyone out there is annoyed that I wasn't more upfront about this earlier, I mean, I guess I can understand where you're coming from, but I didn't exactly go out of my way to try and hide it either. Eve's name has been in the credits of my videos since March of 2022, so anybody and everybody could have seen this. And at any point, somebody could have messaged me and I would have confirmed quite happily that yes, that was indeed Eve that was mentioned in the credits. Being clear, she never told me she planned on doing this, so that she was going to give me money after the video came out, which, I mean, unfortunately, it's not something I can really definitively prove, but I also can't not prove it. I mean, hypothetically, I could show a screenshot that confirms when I created the abusive polyamory document in my Google Drive, but then I would also have to compare that to a screenshot of the first time that Eve and I began talking in DMs. And I suppose if there was a pretty big discrepancy between those dates, that might help to prove what I've said. But hey, you would only have my word that those are even real. I mean, maybe I'm a Photoshop master. But wait a second, some very clever boy, gal, or non-binary pal out there might be saying, what if that was the plan all along? Maybe you and Eve Rickard conspired to lie publicly to your audience and secretly get paid in much smaller individual amounts on Patreon rather than a large sum to hide your tracks. Haha! J'accuse! Now, before Franklin, or anybody else for that matter, creams their pants over this, let's just go ahead and take the time to really break this down, okay? So Eve signed up for my $2 tier. Technically, the amounts might be a little bit different because she is in Canada and obviously conversion rates and blah, 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 blah. But literally my lowest tier on Patreon. That means since March of 2022, Eve Rickard has given me a grand total of... And as you look at this number, I want you to keep in mind that I worked on that first video for a year. 365 days. Keep in mind all of the hours of research, all of the dozens of Quora and blog posts that I had to read through, the people that I had to reach out to via email, some of which didn't go anywhere, as well as going over the allegations themselves several times over, some of which were several pages long. Keep in mind the hours it took to gather up all the screenshots that I needed for that video, getting clips from the relevant podcasts, then writing the script itself, getting feedback on it, and having to do rewrites. Keep in mind all of the hours spent coordinating with quote readers, musical talents, and FX artists who helped to create my titles, as well as just literally filming the video itself and the hours of editing, which would result itself in a over 3 hour long video. Oh, and let's not forget all the hours I spent venting to my therapist, who clearly does not get paid nearly enough. I don't want to undermine how much I appreciate the fact that anybody would be willing to give me even a couple of bucks a month. That means a lot to me, and I'm not trying to naysay that or anything. But respectfully, when you keep in mind everything that I did to make that video, this is nothing. You need to understand that each piece of what I did is usually done by a team of experts. And in a more professional setting, I would have gotten paid hundreds, if not thousands of dollars for the labor that I put into that work. And keep in mind that since that video came out, I have made more videos. So this amount is actually divided among every video that I've made since March of 2022. So you tell me what's more likely. That Eve Rickard and I came up with an elaborate ruse to deceive thousands of people into hating a polyam elder for no reason, and that I knowingly lied to my audience about any financial benefit that I received, all so that I could just be paid not even enough to buy a pen per month for decades on end until either myself or Eve, or both I suppose, die. Or did she just like the way the video came out as well as the previous work I had made prior to that video, and decide to drop a couple of dollars into my metaphorical guitar case once a month. I'm waiting, Frankie boy.
Part 8. Oh my god, how is the legal shit not done?
Okay, we're gonna get through this. I promise. And then, we're still not gonna be done. So when we last left off, the legal battle had taken kind of a bizarre twist. Franklin claimed that he was demanding to see Thorntree's financials to prove whether or not Eve had taken thousands of dollars from him. And in response, Thorntree Press had the audacity to reply, "Yeah, sure, man, come over whenever." Franklin had refused the offer, though, which is bizarre. And his lawyer seemed to be under the impression that it was on Thorntree Press to present the requested documents on like a gold platter or something. And while he was stating all of this publicly, the third-party complaint, again, the complaint that was alleging all of this thousands of dollars that he hadn't been paid, had already been dismissed by Franklin. Now, Franklin did eventually take them up on this offer, but not until September. So, like, after months of dragging this out.
September 22nd. I visited the office of Eve Rickart's attorney today to see the financials for Thorntree Press. Even though the statute of limitations for embezzlement is only 6 years in Oregon, meaning the early royalties I was never paid are now beyond legal remedy, my contract still gives me the right to see all of Thorntree's financials. Miss Rickard and her attorneys have refused to provide financials earlier than 2020, so my lawyer is now subpoenaing those records.
Ooh, teacher, pick me. I have a question. Yeah, subpoena for what exactly? Third-party complaint had already been dismissed by this point, like a month ago even. And Eve's complaint, the one that kind of kicked all of this off, didn't have anything to do with money. Even Franklin's own answers and counterclaims had nothing to do with it either. The trademark dispute, which at this point still hadn't even been assigned an examiner, also did not require any of the items that had been requested for the discovery phase. So, Herr Bunstro, for what case exactly were you requesting this evidence for? Because from where I'm standing, sure seems completely unrelated. Well, sitting, I mean, this video is way too long to stand.
October 1st. I've received a statement stating...
A statement stating? See, it's moments like this where I find it very easy to believe the allegation that Eve wrote the majority of More Than Two. Like, that doesn't... No doubt in my mind.
I've received a statement stating that Eve Rickard has dissolved Thorntree Press, set up a new Canadian publishing company, and transferred all Thorntree Press book contracts to this new company. Apparently she really doesn't want me to see the Thorntree Press financials.
Yes, Franklin. She dissolved an entire company in a matter of a couple of months to keep you from seeing financial records you already had access to and had seen already. That is clearly the most logical explanation, and not at all due to the fact that at this point she was a full Canadian citizen again, and it didn't really make sense to own a company in the United States. Good job, buddy. Just want to point out that if anyone bothered to read the statement he so eloquently included in his timeline, it states that all terms of your publishing contracts will remain the same, which I assume includes the clause about getting to audit Thorntree Press once a year. Actually, speaking of the publishing contracts, there's something in the February 2021 agreement, the signed agreement we actually have, that specifically states that Franklin has given up all claims to anything of the financial records in Thorntree Press before December 9th, 2020. So that seems to suggest that he actually doesn't have the right to see the financial records before that date, right? Really interesting to me in this legal case how we just continue to see Franklin just completely disregarding the terms of these signed contracts that we actually have copies of, while all the while he is just screaming and crying about how Eve Rickard is supposedly trying to weasel her way out of a non-binding mediation session. Oh, I'm sorry, did I say interesting? I meant to say infuriating. There's a pretty lengthy update later in the timeline on October 6th where Franklin is talking about how, even her lawyers are trying to quash the subpoena, right? And just look at what this man had the audacity to say to his followers, who he still hasn't told the third-party complaint has been dismissed, all while having taken thousands of their dollars.
It's a bit seedy and sad that all of this, the legal dispute, the social media smear campaign, everything is in the end about money. More Than Two has been a fabulously successful book that has generated hundreds of thousands of dollars in sales. Sometimes that much money shows a person's true colors. In any event, we are not limiting the subpoena. My lawyer is confident that we shall prevail, and there's a reason Eve Rickard is fighting so hard to hide that information. People don't fight this hard to keep things out of court if those things prove they're right.
And I know what you're all thinking, right? You're thinking, well, Mandy, what do the court documents say? Do they back up Franklin's claims at all? And to that, I say, wow, you really haven't been paying attention, huh? So first of all, you have this nifty little declaration filed by Franklin's lawyer in early September, making the claim that he didn't have any sort of contact with Tanya Manners until July 21st, which we already know isn't true. Like, she first reached out and made contact by email in June. Like, we already saw that. Tanya's declaration filed on September 19th includes several documents, including some emails that are going back and forth between herself and Franklin's lawyer, talking about potentially moving things over to mediation. Important to note here, Franklin kept making the claim that Tanya was trying to get him to, drop the subpoena, implying pretty hard that this was because, she was trying to, keep the public from seeing the truth or something. He also kept trying to claim that they were pushing for a settlement that would have royally screwed him over.
July 26th, Miss Rickard's attorney for Thorntree Press, Tanya Manners, asks if he will take the dispute with Thorntree Press to mediation. September 12th, Miss Rickard, through her current attorney Miss Manners, has proposed a settlement that would have me surrender all of my intellectual property to her, including this website, and forever release her from any claim of attorney fees on my part, while leaving her free to pursue claims of attorney fees. It would also move the venue for future legal disputes to the Canadian court system. My attorney characterized the proposal by saying, "No part of this offer is acceptable."
But when you look at the July 26th email that is provided, which is basically a summarization of a phone conversation she and Franklin's lawyer had, she's not the only one talking about mediation.
We conferred regarding Thorntree's request for a stay of discovery pending the outcome of the motions to dismiss. You stated that you will discuss the same with your client and advise whether a motion will be necessary. You proposed dismissing the third-party complaint without prejudice upon the condition that Thorntree's motion to dismiss be withdrawn and that the third-party claims be submitted to mediation and, if necessary, arbitration as outlined in the publishing agreements. As discussed, I do not have the authority to agree to this, but will present your proposals to our client and provide a response by noon on Friday, July 29th, 2022.
So the emails between the lawyers kind of go back and forth for a little bit. It's not super interesting. There is some discussion about whether or not the game changer would be exempt from mediation. And then it gets interesting again.
Tuesday, July 26th, 2022, 11:32 a.m. We did not discuss the contract for the game changer, nor items not subject to the mediation or arbitration provisions. We did, however, discuss your proposal to include a resolution of all claims asserted in the third-party complaint. During our call, I understood that your proposal had been approved by your client. Please let me know as soon as possible whether you have your client's approval to make this proposal so that I can submit it to my client for consideration.
1:03 p.m. When we spoke this morning, I did not have my client's authorization to agree to mediation and arbitration, but I said I would recommend it. Since then, I have spoken to my client and we are willing to have mediation and arbitration. We are also willing to dismiss the third-party complaint as you and I discussed. According to the contracts, we are supposed to begin with mediation. Please deem the third-party complaint to be the notice required by the contracts. Regarding your request for stay of discovery, we are willing to stay discovery. If mediation is successful, then discovery will not be necessary.
So Franklin's own lawyer was in agreement that discovery might not be necessary anyway? And since when is filing a third-party complaint proper notice? What kind of fucking moon logic is that? Oh, and it gets even better. You remember how the third-party complaint was dismissed on August 3rd? We have emails from after that too.
Thursday, August 4th, 2022. Dear Tanya, I hope that you are having a good day. The purpose of this email is to clarify the email I sent you yesterday. That is, the settlement proposal is the good faith attempt to settle this dispute to comply with the requirements of all the contracts between my client and Thorntree Press, except one contract which does not have that clause. My client is nevertheless proposing a global settlement. Please review this good faith proposal with your client and, as requested, provide me a response by noon tomorrow. Have a safe and enjoyable day.
Although I never represented that we would be responding to your proposal with an offer, I did state that we would provide a response. Respectfully, we do not view your demand below with a 2-day deadline as an attempt to engage in good faith negotiations. Your demand is simply the claims made in your third-party complaint, which I understand that you have now dismissed. Your client never presented these claims to a mediator or arbitration prior to filing the complaint. As a result, Thorntree was forced to expend unnecessary fees and costs to defend against the third-party claim, including motion practice, which is pending. We renew our offer for your client to inspect the books from December 9th, 2021 onward, as outlined in our correspondence dated on July 7th, 2022. Although you previously rejected this offer, please let me know if your position has changed. Additionally, our client intends to participate in good faith negotiations, and an offer will be forthcoming. Best regards, Tanya Manners.
Not gonna lie, Tanya's emails kind of give me life. Like, just the barely held back pettiness in every sentence is just, delicious. Like, really big per my last email energy. I especially love the part where she offers yet again to let him come see the financial records that he claims are being completely denied him. I never knew that lawyer emails could be so much fun to read. But of course, Franklin's timeline doesn't represent any of this accurately at all.
August 9th. Tanya Manners informs my lawyer that Miss Rickard is willing to drop her lawsuit if I am willing to drop my counterclaims and discovery requests and attempt another mediation with her. My lawyer has asked for clarification as to whether or not this includes Miss Rickard abandoning her attempt to claim the trademark to the phrase more than two, and that we will be proceeding with a forensic audit of Thorntree Press financials.
Like, the only thing that this seems to have maybe backed up for Franklin's claims is the whole thing about, maybe Thorntree Press didn't show him the financial records for the specific years he was talking about. In the emails, Tanya notes that Franklin has access to all of the financial records after December of 2021, but then later in another email, when they're confirming the details of when he's going to come over, she says December 2020, so I assume the other email was a typo. Tanya's September 6th email also includes a statement, as previously agreed upon, which, seems to imply that Franklin knew this going in. The day after seeing the finances, Franklin's lawyer filed the previously as threatened subpoena for the case that didn't exist anymore. And then Eve and her lawyer filed a motion to quash it, as is their right. In their motion, they pointed out that the audit of the finances had already happened, and also pointed out that they had given Franklin everything he had asked for.
On September 22nd, 2022, the day of the audit, Thorntree provided 641 records for Veaux's inspection, including sales statements, royalty statements, Excel spreadsheets used to calculate royalty statements, and international rights agreements and licenses. In addition, Veaux requested and Thorntree provided copies of all documents that Veaux wished to take with him.
The motion goes on to quote parts of Franklin's own timeline, particularly parts of it that bring up his suspicions of having, thousands of dollars stolen from him, to point out that this was just an extension of the third-party complaint, which had already been dismissed.
On September 23rd, 2022, Veaux posted on his website, www.morethan2.com/legaltimeline, the following content.
September 23rd. My lawyer has issued a subpoena for the Thorntree Press financials for the years in which I believe Miss Rickard cheated me out of tens of thousands of dollars.
Thorntree moves to quash Veaux's subpoena because it is evident from the record that the subpoena is unreasonable and oppressive, as it seeks documents that are neither related to Rickard's claims nor Veaux's claims or defenses, and is instead a fishing expedition for documents sought in Veaux's since-dismissed third-party complaint. Even further, requiring Thorntree, a party that was dismissed in this action, to produce the documents requested therein would be duplicative of documents already provided in the audit and within Veaux's possession.
My favorite part of this motion, by the way, is when they have to point out that Franklin and his lawyer are demanding to see records for a book that just straight up doesn't exist.
Despite the claims and defenses in this case, Veaux's subpoena included requests for documents related to More Than Two, a memoir of disruptive love, a work that does not exist and therefore cannot be relevant to such claims and defenses.
They really just combined the Game Changer More Than Two into a whole ass new book and then got mad they didn't get records for it. So yeah, kind of an ironic and very satisfying twist of fate. Franklin's own attempts to drum up public support and get all this sympathy from his followers wound up as evidence in court documents that his subpoena was actually about the third-party complaint that was now dismissed and therefore should be thrown out. Sucks to suck, eh, Franklin? He made a big fuss about this on his timeline, of course, notably refusing to say whether or not the subpoena had been successfully quashed.
October 12th. My attorney asks Miss Rickard's attorney to produce the documents for discovery. October 13th. Miss Rickard's attorney announces Miss Rickard will drop the lawsuit and go into another mediation session if I drop counterclaims in the discovery request.
According to a quick Google search, a motion to quash usually takes about 7 business days for a judge to make a decision. So with the quash having been filed on October 6, 2022, which, according to my handy document here, was a Thursday, that means a judge would have likely made the decision by Monday the 17th, unless it was filed the same day, in which case it would have been the previous Friday, the 14th. So Franklin's lawyer continuing to demand documents, assuming that actually happened, is a tad weird, right? Now, in fairness, I don't know if that's true of all thing quashed, or if subpoenas have their own rules or different timelines or such. I'm not really sure. I tried to search for this information. I couldn't find it. And unfortunately, Legal Kimchi wasn't able to actually look over this part of the script for me because he's all busy, being a good dad and stuff. It's oh my God, you have a new baby, big deal. I'm 36 and still a baby, come on. On October 17th though, a big announcement came through. The thing we had been waiting for this whole time. An examiner had finally been assigned to the trademark application case. And it's about here that this wild glimpse into the magical world of judiciary process comes down to a grinding halt. No, seriously. After this update, there are only 2 more on the timeline. One of them, from October 20th, makes the announcement that another attempt at mediation will begin early next year. The last one, on December 13th, says,
My attorney filed a motion today to delay a ruling on my ex's attempt to steal my trademark until after January's mediation. In the meantime, we have prepared documents demonstrating that I have been using the phrase more than 2 commercially in conjunction with downloadable books and educational materials since 2006, and therefore my ex has no claim over it, which we plan to present to the trademark inspector in the event that she does not withdraw her attempts to register the trademark application.
So he and his lawyer were preparing to argue their case in the oppositional period of the trademark application process that they were always going to have a chance to do since this whole odyssey started.
Okay then, that was always allowed.
Fucking hate it here. Anyway, the court case itself, the one filed by Eve about Franklin having not held up parts of their signed agreement from February of 2021, was eventually dismissed. Eve and Franklin's lawyers filed a joint stipulation on October 19th stating,
Plaintiff Eve Rickard, by and through her counsel of record, and defendant Franklin Veaux, by and through his counsel of record, hereby stipulate that the claims against defendant Franklin Veaux and counterclaims against Eve Rickard in the above captioned case shall be dismissed without prejudice and without costs or fees to any party, and that there being no just reason for delay, judgment be entered forthwith.
The case was officially dismissed on October 26th, and as far as I'm aware, Franklin did not add any more updates or anything like that to his legal timeline on the More Than Two website. I mean, other than, of course, eventually just deleting the whole timeline and telling everybody that they had reached some kind of settlement. It is certainly possible that there were more updates that I missed after I got my screenshots. I did check back a few times and I didn't see anything, but it's possible I missed something. If I did, feel free to reach out to me and let me know. Certainly, I think it's very likely that since the mediation process itself is confidential, it's not likely that he ever posted anything more. But, again, if I'm wrong, feel free to correct me. On Eve's blog, Brighter Than Sunflowers, which posted a whole 2 posts about the legal battle while it was ongoing, by the way, Eve shares a bit more details about the outcome of the settlement.
In January 2023, as part of a global settlement, I acquired full copyright to More Than Two and Polyamory and Jealousy, and I am currently working on revised editions scheduled for late 2023, Non-Monogamy and Jealousy, formerly Polyamory and Jealousy, and late 2024, More Than Two. I am now the sole financial beneficiary of all sales of these books. The Relationship Bill of Rights from More Than Two has been released into the public domain.
Woo! Yeah! Pew, 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 pew. Oh, sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt. Continue.
Apart from royalties paid to authors, salaries paid to employees, and payments made to subcontractors, I am the sole financial beneficiary of Thorn Apple Press and its titles. More Than Two Essentials is the name of a series of books I am curating by Canadian authors on focused topics in non-monogamy. I am the exclusive owner of the URL morethan2.ca and all content located there, as well as all social media accounts associated with the book More Than Two on Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, and YouTube. These sites are managed by Thorn Apple Press personnel, including me. Thornapple Press, through its parent company Talk Science to Me Communications Incorporated, holds trademarks, application pending, for the mark More Than Two for books, ebooks, and audiobooks in the USA, and for books, ebooks, audiobooks, websites, and social media in Canada. Neither I nor any of these properties have any association with the American website bearing the same name. I did not contribute content to that site, and that site shares no content with the book More Than Two, which was entirely original work developed collaboratively in 2013 through 2014.
Of note, Franklin got back the IP to Black Iron and also had all of his legal fees covered. So did he need the GoFundMe, or? They also agreed not to talk about each other publicly by name anymore or to engage in any disparagement, which is why basically everything has been deleted, including the timeline, and Franklin no longer pointedly accuses her of abuse. I mean, he's still definitely accusing her of abuse, like he still has abuse survivor in his bio, but like he's not doing it in such a pointed manner on his website anymore. I kind of low-key hope something does happen with the Relationship Bill of Rights now that's in the public domain. Like, I don't know, I just think you have a lot of fun with that. You know, someone do something cool, like, I don't know, make a movie or something. In a way, the end of the legal battle feels almost anticlimactic, doesn't it? After all of the fist waving and screams about injustice that we were enduring from Franklin, to have it all just end quietly behind closed doors, it's almost disappointing, isn't it? I mean, I'm glad it stopped being a clusterfuck. I'm sure for Eve and her legal team, this whole thing was just like one giant headache that they were so relieved to finally not have to deal with anymore. I'm just saying, from like a narrative perspective, it does seem a little unsatisfying. There are technically more things that I could talk about. Like, there were plenty of more little snide comments that Franklin made throughout his timeline, trying to look like a big old brain boy, like dunking on Eve, which, considering how much of it we now know are lies, makes it ring all the more hollow. I could have also talked about Franklin's weird obsession with like constantly name dropping Eve's lawyers in the timeline, but rarely his own. Which is kind of interesting because if you do a Google search on Mr. Dubois, some interesting things come up. But don't you worry, beloved viewers. While we may be done talking about the legal shenanigans that Franklin and Eve had to engage with, we are far from done from talking about the man himself. Oh, sorry, did I just say don't worry? I meant to say worry. Worry a lot. Save yourself, children. This video is already far too long and we're still not done yet.
Part 9. Prolific doesn't mean good.
Okay, we've gotten over the worst of it. I promise. I mean, there's still sucky things to come, but at least there's no more reading court documents or having to explain like 3 separate legal issues. By the way, shout out to my script advisors. Despite how long the original video was, there was plenty that didn't actually make it into the final cut, partially due to pacing and also trying to explain everything as concisely as possible. Oops. But also there were some things that felt honestly a tad unnecessary to bring up. Like, yeah, they might, paint the picture with a bit more detail, but overall did feel a little too off topic to get into. For example, can you believe that sometimes Franklin is wrong about things? I know, shocking. While I was conducting my research for the original video, I came across a few stories in which people claimed to have seen times when Franklin was really wrong in his core answers, like really wrong. And when they would correct him in the comments, he would either react in a very angry way or else just ignore them completely. I've even had people in the comments of that original video share similar stories. Now, important caveat here, I cannot confirm that this is true or not. These are random people on the internet. Oftentimes they were talking about subjects that I personally don't really have that much knowledge about myself, so it wasn't something I was able to independently verify. And to be honest with you, I didn't really feel like adding like a whole other layer of research onto everything else I was already trying to accomplish. So feel free to take all of this with like a huge spoonful of salt. What I can tell you is that I personally have had a couple of instances where Franklin was talking about a subject that I did have enough familiarity with to know for certain and to be able to judge just how wrong he was. Like this one where he tells somebody that a 70-page YouTube script is too long. As somebody who spends a lot of time within video essayist space, whether I'm creating my own, interacting with other video essayists, or just like watching video essays on the internet, this is just like impressively wrong. Like, everyone obviously has their own opinion as to what like an ideal video length is, but considering Bomber Guy just came out with a video that's almost 4 hours long and has already 18 million views, I assure you long form video content is doing just fine. Besides, there is no like universal standard for a YouTube script. Like, there's no format that we've all agreed to write in. As somebody who has read multiple other scripts from other creators, I can assure you everybody has a different style or preference on how to format their scripts. Some people like to format like a proper movie script. Other people are doing more stream of consciousness. Some people will take the time to really like detail out the actual visual gags that they want in their videos as well. And then other people are literally just writing the dialogue. So for this person, 70 pages could be a 3-hour script, or it could be 45 minutes. Who knows? Franklin chiming in on this and acting like he knew anything honestly just further demonstrates how little he actually knows about YouTube content creation. And you don't even have to take my word for this. The very first comment on this post was someone telling him he's wrong. There was also some answers he gave talking about like copyright and YouTube, and this guy clearly has no idea just how almost hilariously common it is for people to have the copyright system weaponized against them, especially if they're a smaller creator. Like, he literally at one point tried to make the claim that if someone files a copyright claim against you, they probably have a good reason for it. And it's just so hilariously wrong. Like, Franklin, my brother in Christ, what the fuck are you talking about? Creators, smaller ones especially, who don't have as much power or influence to fight these kind of things, get hit with copyright claims and erroneous DMC takedown notices all the time. It's very common. Even when everything they're using is actually fair use and, not a contract dispute. It's basically an open secret on this platform that YouTube just refuses to acknowledge. It's far more noteworthy when a DMC takedown notice is actually like correct than when it's not. Look at the great Lindsay Ellis-Addison Kane dispute. Kane decided to file a copyright infringement thing against Lindsay because she didn't like the way that Lindsay was criticizing her, and also because she felt that Lindsay was making fun of her book. Which, I mean, she was, but that's not, like, copyright doesn't protect you from that. I'm not saying there's never an incidence of it happening, of course. If you poke around YouTube for more than 5 minutes, you can certainly find people who are using copyright material in unfair ways that are definitely not covered by fair use. For example, maybe somebody is uploading entire unaltered clips from a very famous Amazon Prime show. Huh, that's strange. Isn't that Jorth Innkeeper's channel? Franklin's spouse? Interesting. Well, I'm sure she can explain it to him then. Remember earlier in the video, like 1,000 years ago, I made a point to say that I didn't really feel like I was qualified or knowledgeable enough to say whether or not I thought Franklin or Eve deserved the more than 2 trademark? Well, I said that back then because I really wanted to hammer home this point now. There are times when you do not, nor should you, give your opinion about something. I know nothing about trademark beyond like a quick Google search can give me, right? Much in the same way, I don't think that Franklin really knows that much about YouTube, at least not in a first-hand way. Anything he knows is second or third hand. So maybe he should shut up about it. He probably shouldn't answer questions about a lot of things, honestly.
What do you think of the phrase, never love with all yourself, for tomorrow when you lose your loved one, you lose yourself too?
I think it sounds like a description of borderline personality disorder.
It's kind of funny to me that the man who continually demonstrates that he knows far less about anything that he claims to know about thinks that he is in any position at all to lecture about proper journalism or research or like any of that. Like, stay in your lane, dude. When Franklin found out about my original video, he made a point to publicly accuse me, without naming me, of course, Howard, of not knowing how to do proper research, while also admitting he knew nothing about me.
Apparently, according to a friend of a friend, some random person I don't know has been researching me and is planning an expose of some sort for next February. A lot of folks use that word research these days. I don't think it means what they think it means.
Mentions of people not being fully informed or just deciding to, jump to a side without doing their proper research is something that comes up a few times in those aforementioned blogs about bullying.
If you have 2 different individuals who say 2 different things and your goal is truth, you have work to do. It takes effort, it takes investigation, it takes careful consideration, it takes mental and, dare I say it, emotional labor. The only moral action when confronted by an accusation of abuse is to believe the accusation wholeheartedly. Asking for more details is enabling abuse. Asking follow-up questions is enabling abuse. Any attempt at fact-finding is enabling abuse, if it doesn't support the accusations anyway. I've offered opinions on people in situations about which I was uninformed because I wanted to be the good guy but didn't want to take the time to better inform myself. In fact, the times I've done this, I would have strenuously denied that was what I was doing because of course I knew what I was talking about, even though I didn't know the situation or talk to the people involved. I let my own narratives about how the world works fill in the blanks for me.
Well, he admits he is sometimes uninformed. So, progress, I guess. This is one of those moments where I honestly feel I'm a little bit in danger of, like, indulging a little bit of paranoia, because I can't prove that he's definitely talking about me here, but it sure feels like it. There's a flavor here, sort of je ne sais quoi, that feels very similar to the blog wrap-up post from 2021. It reminds me of the way that Franklin talks about Louisa and proper journalism. Something about the repetitiveness and the way he just feels so confident that this is indeed the case just has a very similar flavor to what I'm talking about. Maybe he's not talking specifically about me. Maybe this is more of a reference to basically anybody who has refused to believe his side of the narrative. Or, you know, maybe this is kind of me getting lumped in with other people like Kali Tal or Billy from the Man Whore podcast. Speaking to Franklin directly here for a second, how exactly do you define good research? Because as best as I can tell from where I'm sitting, it seems like you only consider something proper research if it already agrees with you. You seem to be operating under the assumption that if I don't agree with you, it's just because I'm too stupid or uninformed. Making more comparisons to conspiracy theorists, Franklin kind of reminds me here of a person who will like tell you like, oh, you know, do your own research. So you do it and then you still come to a different conclusion. And then they go, oh, no, that you didn't look at the right links. Look at this one. And the link they send you is very clearly biased. You know, Franklin, my video provided citations as well as a link to a resource document that you could have checked if you wanted to. I read multiple books and articles about abusive relationships and power dynamics. I very specifically sought out resources about how those abuse dynamics appear in marginalized communities and the responses to those, as well as listened to a couple of episodes from very specific podcasts talking about abusive polyamorous relationships. I read Franklin's blog, his accountability website. I read, multiple Quora posts. I read the survivor accounts. I read people's takes on the survivor accounts, including people who supported Franklin, by the way. I also listened to the Man Whore podcast interview with Billy, and I even went through dozens of now deleted screenshots from Franklin's social media accounts. I spent an entire year researching this, sometimes really blatantly trying to see if there was any truth to what he was talking about, if I could find anything that backed up his claims. Because being completely honest, there were times when I really did start to wonder if he was telling the truth, because he was just so insistent. So I did look. I followed the breadcrumbs that the man himself left. And time again, I just came upon obvious misrepresentations and outright lies. So, Franklin, sweet bunny boy, other than not taking what you said at face value, what specifically was wrong with my research? Come on, let's hear it. That's what I thought. Is this how you research? Is this how you research? Oh, I'd love to research this book, but it's so hard because of these big old boobs in my way. Condescending ass. Not that it should matter, but my colleagues next door over at the Leftist Cooks channel actually made a video talking about journalism and journalistic bias. Franklin, you should watch it. I think you'd really like it. Sarah has actually studied journalism, so if she thinks that video held up to journalistic standards, even with my not having called myself a journalist, I think I'm gonna go ahead and take her word over yours, Franklin. Excuse me if I don't feel like taking research advice from a nearly 60-year-old man who still refuses to engage with any of the allegations in an honest and mature way, especially, though not limited, to the ones brought forth by Amber.
Part 10. Let's call it what it is.
This next section gets pretty serious, and I don't think it's really appropriate to wear bunny ears during it, so this is what you get. In November of 2023, Franklin wrote a blog called Day of Consent. Does yes mean yes? I will not read this blog in its entirety for a few reasons. One of them being that I am actually trying to wrap up this video and we don't really have time to do a full reading and analysis of it. And also because honestly, I find it absolutely horrendous. You can find screenshots of that in my Google Drive folder, which will be in the description down below, but do consider yourself warned. It is a very difficult blog to read. The blog is talking about consent, or at least it starts off that way. Initially, it's sort of building off of these statements around consent, but then it very quickly spirals.
Please do this with me means no. Not only do a lot of folks who claim to respect consent say, under the right circumstances, that yes means no. They'll even tell you that a yes that comes from a place of, hi there, here's a thing that I really, really want to do. You interested in doing this with me, please? Means no.
Spoiler, it's about Amber, because of course it is. It's not something that's ever said explicitly so, but for anybody who's paying attention, it's very obvious. He talks about how they met, how he remembers the relationship going, etc.
She talked quite a lot about her husband, how incompatible they were, how she wanted to explore BDSM, but he didn't want to, how she felt stifled by the fact he wouldn't do the things she wanted to explore. He had a whole collection of BDSM gear in her closet, she said, that he was reluctant to use with her. Fast forward a year. She's finalizing her divorce and she's asked me out. One of the very first things she says in this newly minted relationship is she wants to explore BDSM with me. I have this whole collection of bondage gear, she says. I want to use it with you. I say yes, because my understanding of consent is that when an adult person asks you to explore something with them, that means they're consenting to explore that thing with them. But what do I know?
Just like with his accountability website, Franklin completely misrepresents Amber's allegations against him. Specifically, rather, the one about BDSM.
Fast forward one more time to the present day, I learned she's been talking to a person claiming to be a journalist, telling the world that she never wanted to be involved in BDSM, or maybe she did, but someone in their mid-20s is too young to consent, and anyway, she's not into BDSM anymore, and isn't terribly abusive that I participated in it with her. And this story gets some currency with some prominent folks in the kink community, which is shocking and a bit disappointing. Because you see, a person who accepts this narrative does not and cannot accept that consent exists.
It is a long, rambly, barely comprehensible blog that takes dig after dig at Amber in ways that even I honestly at times found shocking. At one point, he implies that because she has changed the name that she has used online now a couple of times, that somehow means she doesn't feel a responsibility to the past.
Maybe that's why she would have always keep a blog or a journal for a year or so, then delete it. Then a while later start a new one, only to delete again. It's incredibly freeing, this constant burning down of your own record. It allows you to say, no, I didn't do that, I didn't say that, I didn't feel that, I was always felt the way I feel right now.
And what the f*** is this guy's problem?
Say what you will about me, Franklin, but at least when I'm quoting something or referencing something you said, I can actually provide the screenshots to back up my claims. You, on the other hand, continue to just ignore the vast majorities of the accusations, or you get weirdly specifically focused on one and still manage to misrepresent it. Because let's not forget, Amber has an entire statement about her relationship with Franklin, which, by the way, was constructed via various emails. She never sat down with Louisa. That in itself is a f***ing lie. The concerns that she brought up about the BDSM aspects of their relationship represents one single paragraph out of this entire thing. Out of 4,458 words, yes, I did go through and count, he focuses on 70 of them. And he still manages to f*** it up. Since the sleaze bucket doesn't seem to have the balls to actually quote her directly, here is what she actually said.
I don't feel like I had the tools to properly consent to BDSM. I don't think the age difference was appropriate. I don't think my lack of experience was appropriate. I won't have anything to do with BDSM now. For me, what happened with him laid the groundwork for things that were much worse for me later on. But it's all part of the same, just awful continuum of awful stuff.
She also talked about how worshipy the relationship was on her side, how Franklin seems basically unable to manage his own relationships without the help of other partners to step in, and also how he is constantly seeming to look for women in his life to be these like perfect visions that he can then put up on a pedestal, which he definitely did with Amber. She also talked about how she had to financially support him when they were together, to the point where she was in massive debt by the end of that relationship, and also how much work that his partners, both, emotionally or physical labor, have to put in order for him to have this, beautiful, magical polyam life that he then gets to go profit off of. But no, Franklin, no. Let's not focus on any of that. No. Instead, let's get into the semantics about whether someone 12 years younger than you consented to everything that happened in that relationship because she owned a spreader bar. There's a whole conversation in here somewhere around power dynamics and re-examining relationships when we're older and more experienced. Unfortunately, I can't really get into that now because I had to spend so much of this video talking about the ridiculous legal shit that Franklin also lied about. But yes, it is a part of this conversation, and I did want to acknowledge that. I personally find it extremely infuriating and frustrating that Franklin can't for even a second acknowledge that maybe that could be part of the case here for Amber. The really wild thing about all this is that Franklin is ultimately proving Amber right. Amber rightfully identified that Franklin has a habit of holding women up to this impossible standard in his head and then labeling the ones who fail as being faulty. He's quick to assign one woman as manipulative, evil, emotional, and then the next as an angel who has come down from heaven to make him question his worldview. Amber is his game changer. She's the reason that book exists, and according to Franklin himself, was a huge influence on the way that he practices polyamory to this day. But now, the way he writes about her, all the jabs in this blog, the way he gleefully almost brings up her divorce several times, mocking her understanding of consent, and then ending it by making the wild accusation that she's somehow gaslighting him. It just all feels so gross. And I recognize that's a really small word. There's much harsher language I could use to describe my feelings about this. I really could, but that's the most succinct way that I can describe all of it. It's disgusting. Aware of it or not, Franklin is a misogynist. He is. I have no doubt in my mind. Misogyny isn't just hating women. That's simple, cartoonish, easy, lazy even. That's like thinking racism is just wearing KKK robes. Misogyny is also about splitting women into the goods and the bads. The cool women who are smart and sexy and will laugh and smile and shake their heads knowingly when you don't know how to make mac and cheese. And then the bad women, those bitches who are emotional and manipulative and just change their mind on a whim about consent. Look at who Franklin chooses to mock publicly. The ones that he is convinced and is trying to convince others are a part of some evil cabal against him. Collie, Louisa, Eve, Amber, me even. Is it a coincidence that we're all women? Maybe. I doubt it though, especially when you contrast that with the way that he's talked about men, like Billy and Kevin, for example. The latter of whom in particular, he was extremely cautious about how he responded to on his accountability website. It's just too obvious for me not to mention. I mean, this is a guy who has now several times mocked people publicly for using the hashtag #BelieveWomen after all.
You see this play out in simplistic bumper sticker liberal morality. Believe women is an example. Not support people who say they've been abused while also fact-checking, which is too complicated to fit on a bumper sticker and therefore doesn't work well with liberal virtue signaling. Let's turn that around a bit. Believe whites, that feels a little uncomfortable, doesn't it? Why is the one okay but the other isn't?
Oh, I'm sorry, I'm breaking character. Oh, that's...
Why does that make you uncomfortable, bud? What? Actually, wait a second. I'm sorry, I didn't fully register. Did he just compare women to white people? Does he think women are privileged? Is that what's going on? Does he think women are sorry, I'll get back in character. Liberals will probably tell you, well, as a historically marginalized group, women have long been accustomed to and not being believed. So historically, there's an imbalance that needs to be rectified, and all of that is true. But why believe women rather than don't automatically disbelieve women?
Dude, that's what it means. That a hashtag is a snappy, more trend-friendly way to sum up a more complex, nuanced subject. Hashtag believe women does mean the things that you're talking about. We just use hashtag believe women because it's quicker. Dude, I have a hard time believing a man who's been around since basically the internet was f***ing invented doesn't understand what a hashtag is. And lest I get accused of cherry picking, Franklin actually recently doubled down on this take in a Quora post that came out while I was working on this script. This was posted in February of 2024, this year, and in some places is literally just word for word the same blog. Grandpa, please come back inside and stop yelling at those clouds. This laser focus on one detail and turning it into these long, rambling blog posts, arguing against things that nobody said while ignoring blatant, more pressing criticisms, is very much a pattern of Franklin's. This man wrote an entire blog post about how, yes, it is possible to be abusive while teaching somebody a skill, a response, I think, to this section of my video, which, by the way, only equaled like a little over a minute of runtime, and also argues against something I never said. Why was that barely even discussed point, that allegation that honestly almost didn't even make it into that video, worthy of an entire blog post? But some of the far more damning allegations continue to go unacknowledged. You know, Franklin, you've made a really big deal about Amber's allegations. You've mentioned her several times now, and even, I think, name dropped her a couple times in Quora posts. And yet, not a single peep about Paula. Not that it's like a competition or anything, but personally, when it came to discussing of a kinky dynamic in a relationship, I found Paula's statement to be far more disturbing. You know, like when she claimed you blatantly crossed her boundaries and put needles into her body. I'm just saying, of the allegations, I think that's the one that probably got you banned from certain kinky spaces. Just saying. Also haven't touched Melanie's or Elaine's with a 10-foot pole. Can't help but notice that. There's also the way you've chosen to summarize Rose's testimony, which is so radically different from what they actually said. I honestly didn't even recognize it at first. Just a little pro tip for you. If the person who spent a year of their life researching the allegations against you isn't even certain who you're talking about, you're doing a bad job summarizing. Franklin has announced on his website that a new edition of The Game Changer is forthcoming, and I can't help but wonder if in this new edition, his depiction of Amber will be more critical, which combined with the blog posts and the stuff on Quora paint a very disturbing image of his fixation on her. Maybe it's not fair to speculate like that when I don't have more information available to me, but personally, I tend to believe what someone's continual behaviors, their repeated patterns, tell me. Men in positions like Franklin play this game a lot, even when dozens come forward with eerily similar stories. They'll claim their accusers are liars, that they just misremembered. Maybe they're looking to get famous or just want some money. They will throw out every explanation out there except for the most obvious one. And it is for this reason, especially, though not limited to, that it can make it extremely difficult for women especially to speak out about their experiences. That is what hashtag believe women is about, you condescending fuck. When the New York Times put the 35 women on the cover of their magazine who had alleged Bill Cosby had sexually assaulted them, they left one stool empty. That stool was left empty to represent all of the survivors who might still be out there yet, but too scared to share their own stories. Or maybe even are no longer with us. I think about that stool a lot. I think about what it would look like if we took a picture of all the Franklin Veaux survivors and they had an empty stool with them as well. I think about the fact that Eve's story is no longer on the survivor website, a stipulation, of course, of the settlement with Franklin. And I think about the fact that there are very likely other people out there who are too scared or for whatever reason have chosen not to share their stories publicly. Considering how adamant Franklin has been about flinging completely unproven accusations of financial goings-ons, as well as his almost uncanny ability to ruthlessly mock women he claims to have once respected, I really do not judge anybody who has made that decision for themselves. I think about the fact that I know there are more survivors out there. There's the person that was scared off by Louisa, and there was the person who reached out to me privately after my first video came out. I won't be sharing any details here. Obviously, they are not mine to share, and I take very seriously the confidence that has been entrusted in me. I'm very humbled by that, and I really thank that person for reaching out to me and being willing to share. What I do know is that we have proof that there are 13 people out there. We have stories that poke holes in Franklin's narrative. And sadly, in situations like this, it is very likely there are more. We have legal documents proving that he was misrepresenting the proceedings to his followers that he was getting thousands of dollars from. We have screenshots, signed author contracts, and emails from lawyers. We have an over 3-hour-long video detailing all the evidence in a clear way. What does Franklin have? A bunch of blog posts and Quora entries screaming about unfair treatment, cancel culture, and internet bullies. But hey, you don't have to take my word on that. Do your own research.
Oh, thank fuck we're at the conclusion.
45 minutes. I wanted this video to be 45 minutes long. Stupid Mandy. I really want this video to end on as positive of a note as possible, which is very difficult considering the subject matter, but permit me to try. A lot of this video is focused, unfortunately, on Franklin, much like the first one was, but the lives of the survivors have moved forward as well. Eve's new edition of More Than Two, co-authored with Andrea Zanin, is coming out later this year. Thornapple Press continues to release books about non-monogamy that I want desperately, including this 365-page devotional by Avita Sawyers. If you're not following Avita Sawyers, do yourself a favor and start doing that right now. Avita's great. I love her so much. She's so cool. By the way, I did actually have the opportunity to get to meet one of the survivors in person a while back, and that was a really amazing experience, very humbling. They did criticize my audio, which YouTubers fucking hate, with a passion, but that's okay. It's fine. And hopefully she has noticed an improvement. Also, and this is a major point of pride for myself, I got to see a picture of the wholesome lesbians, everybody. Yes, I did. They are still together. Turns out I should have been called them wholesome queers because they're doing like a throuple thing that includes a man, but like that's okay. That's awesome. Their family is wicked adorable. They're so cute. Oh my god. Oh my god. I really hope that I am done talking about Franklin Veaux. Oh my god, I really hope so. Like, I'm sure he's gonna keep saying ridiculous things and misrepresenting all the allegations against him, because how else is he gonna spend all that free time not going to conventions? But I don't want to do this for my whole life. Like, I don't want this channel to become the Franklin Veaux and I Got Beef channel that we drag out for all of the world to see. There are plenty of other projects that I want to move on to that I'm very excited about, and I really have no interest in talking about Franklin again. Plus, I think my therapist will kill me if I make another video about him. Granted, I'm a never say never kind of gal, you know, like certainly if he does something noteworthy that I feel is worthy of discussion, you know, there'll be a video about that. But mostly I intend to just live my little life and stay away from that slimy little toad as much as possible. I'm sorry. That was mean to toads. This year is a big one for me in terms of content creation. I kind of did a soft relaunch of my channel, hence why there's like a new quality camera. Ooh, fancy. I have some really interesting projects planned for this year that I will hopefully get out. And I hope that for those of you who, you know, maybe you're new to me and you really only came here for the juicy judicial drama, will, you know, consider sticking around and seeing what's coming next. I have a video planned about my feelings around death and how Michael Flanagan's content has weirdly helped me out with that. Can I call it content when it's a TV show? I don't know. I feel like YouTube has rotted my brain. I just call everything content now. I have a pretty hefty script that's still not done yet. That's actually about being neurodivergent and non-monogamous. So definitely stick around for that one. The next video I have scheduled, unless something happens and it gets delayed, is technically a secret. But what I can tell you is that it is going to be concerning less than ideal relationships with parents. So like super light one. All of these are much bigger projects which take more time and effort to produce, much like with this video. And hopefully that added extra, you know, effort and such is really coming through on your screen. The fact that I'm able to do this is in part, of course, to all of the evil cabals I am aligned with, but also because of my supporters over on patreon.com/mainlymandy. Patreon, as I explained earlier, is basically a volunteer membership service where people who enjoy what I do give me some money once a month. That's pretty cool, right? In exchange, they get some fun things that are not available anywhere else, including behind the scenes footage, or like in the case of my previous video that I made about this subject, an entire video diary that includes some of my extra thoughts, more behind the scene footage, and even some deleted scenes that didn't make it into that final video. You can find a link, of course, to my Patreon down in the description box below. I would especially appreciate people choosing to support me right now because basically since fall of last year, I've had a pretty significant drop in my Patreon. I think I'm down about $100. And unfortunately, if you're as broke as me, that actually is a pretty big drop. And I totally understand why this has happened. You know, it's been a while since the video came out and all of us are a bit broke right now. But if you are comfortable enough to do so and can give me some money right now, I'd really appreciate it. Things are a little tight. My credit cards are almost maxed out, so anything you can give would really mean a lot to me. Alternatively, if a one-time donation is more your thing, you can of course give me money through Ko-fi, Venmo, and PayPal. All of those links are also in the description box down below. Sharing this video, commenting down below, and liking would also help me out a lot, especially where it has been a minute since I made a video. Please get the algorithm to like me again. Thank you to everybody who watched this video in its entirety. A special shout out, of course, to all the survivors who continue to be the most coolest, badass people that I know. And of course, a big thank you to whoever invented Advil. Doing the Lord's work. Thank you.